I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nigel Farage, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, hello and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in the next hour, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. The dastardly duo are here. In a few moments, we'll be going head-to-head in a clash of minds with former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider, and also former advisor to David Cameron, Philip Blond. That'll be the clash. In my monologue at 4, Sir Keir Starmer today said we must not flinch at flying the St George's flag. He declared that Labour is the patriotic party. Do you believe him? At 5, it's my outside guest. She's a former Olympic and world champion who had an extraordinary career in BMX racing and track and cycling. Then, coming up in an hour, do you think Mark Rowley should resign? We've seen police officers bearing rainbow flags, wearing rainbow laces, and with the Met issuing apologies, Suella Braverman says enough is enough. What do you think? But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. British Jewish leaders will meet the Metropolitan Police Commissioner later this week after accusing the force of a series of high-profile errors. Sir Mark Rowley is facing calls to quit over his handling of pro-Palestinian protests, with the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman suggesting he's emboldened anti-Semites. The Board of Deputies of British Jews says mistakes have had a devastating effect on the previously high level of trust held in the police. The campaign against anti-Semitism is also calling for Sir Mark to resign or be sacked after its chief executive was described as openly Jewish by an officer. Cabinet Minister Claire Contino says the government is addressing the incident.
The Home Secretary has made clear that what happened was unacceptable. I understand there's going to be a meeting in the coming days. I don't know what conversation is going to take place there. I think we should see how that conversation goes. But ultimately, what's really important is that people in the Jewish community feel safe. They know that we're on their side, and that what we want to see is equal policing in this country, and also to make sure that they can go about their normal lives. That's what I want to see.
A decision by the US to approve £49 billion in aid for Ukraine has been welcomed by the UK, with the Foreign Secretary describing it as a vital step forward. After months of wrangling, American politicians ended a deadlock, agreeing to provide a package which will also help replenish weapons and munitions. President Zelensky says the move will keep the war from expanding and will save thousands of lives. It now heads to the Senate, which is expected to pass the bill in the next few days. 20 million people were plagued by antisocial behaviour and vandalism last year, according to new figures. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Coopers says a Labour government would crack down on yobs. She promised the party would get tough to restore community safety. Former police officer Oliver Lawrence says more policy is not the answer.
More legislation, more policy, more procedure isn't going to fix it. I would argue that we've got more than enough with more than 32 pieces of legislation already out there. What we need is proper enforcement and proper execution of the legislation by our justice system to make sure that we have penalties for people that commit these crimes in our communities.
The victims of last weekend's knife attack in Sydney have been remembered at a candlelight vigil on Bondi Beach. Six people were killed by Joel Cauchi in a shopping centre last Saturday. The attacker was shot dead by police. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said, "May those we have lost rest in eternal peace forever in our hearts." Wales is set to change a controversial law on new speed limits. 500,000 people signed a petition raising concerns about the 20 miles per hour zones, saying some routes should not have been included. The government says the new limit will remain in place around schools, hospitals and built-up areas, but has admitted its guidance needs to be corrected. The Welsh Transport Minister is expected to announce the changes on Tuesday. A record number of people are running the London Marathon. Supporters are lining the streets to cheer the 50,000 people taking part as they attempt to complete the 26.2-mile route. They started just after 10 o'clock this morning, the event raising millions of pounds for charities. Professional athletes kicked off the event with Kenyan Alexander Munyeo winning the race in 2 hours and 4 minutes. In the women's category, Olympic champion Perez Jepchirchir set a new world record. Also Kenyan, she finished in 2 hours, 16 minutes and 16 seconds. She says she was surprised by her achievement.
Feeling grateful. I'm so happy, unbelievable. I was not expecting that. It means a lot for me because last year I was expecting to win, but unfortunately I didn't win. I was third, but I was happy too. But this year I'm so happy.
For the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to the gbnews.com/alerts. Now let's return to Nana.
Hello, good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. If you've just tuned in, it's just coming up to 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. The Metropolitan Police, God help us. I remember when I was young, the police in general were revered. Standards were high. You even had to be over a certain height before being considered for a job, which would be seen as discrimination nowadays, which it is. But it was a mark of just how scrupulous they were in who they recruited. But to become a police officer was a huge honour. And they would rightly scrutinise people before they enabled them. Fast forward to now, and last week it was reported some 18,000 officers were recruited without even a face-to-face interview. This was post-pandemic, so there was no excuse for it, and we wonder why we've ended up where we are now. Scared, battered forces hindered by admin, diversity and inclusion at net zero. They come bearing rainbow flags, wearing rainbow laces, dancing at events they should be policing and taking the knee. Showing up in their droves for crimes of hurty feelings, but are nowhere to be seen when true crime is occurring. All we need now are police to drive electric cars to make them completely useless, although I shouldn't say that out loud because somebody somewhere in a fully staffed net zero department is probably planning it as we speak. We've already got electric ambulances, so it wouldn't surprise me. The Metropolitan Police have seen failure after failure, too many to list. In recruitment, remember Wayne Cousins, the serving Met officer who was nicknamed the rapist before killing Sarah Everard. How on earth did he even get the job, let alone keep it? The misogyny, sexism, racism, which has been uncovered in various reports, although I suspect much of it has been there for some time. And the sad fact, many officers don't appear to know the law or are doing a very bad job at interpreting it. It's a shame, really. The most recent incidents have been the Met's handling of the pro-Palestine marches. Here they are, arguing with a woman who's afraid of a man at a march wielding a swastika.
You want to walk with me because I can point these people out to you. And again, I was told when I asked that a swastika was not necessarily anti-Semitic or disruptive to public order. That doesn't seem right to me.
Everything needs to be taken within context, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's a context of why does the swastika need context?
What exactly are you confused about?
What I'm confused is how you don't. In what context a swastika is not anti-Semitic? This is what I want to know. Because again,
I suppose to some, I don't know how everybody would feel about that song. That has happened. I'm here working to the bronze commander, and it is not my responsibility, unfortunately, my role, to walk down the road.
They arrested a man over an allegation of assault whilst he held a sign pointing out that Hamas are terrorists. And then they let him go later as he was de-arrested. And again, here they are threatening a Jewish man with arrest.
You lot of people here now, you've been escorted out of this area so you can go about your business, go where you like freely, or if you choose to remain here because you are causing a breach of these other people, if I remain here, you will arrest me. Because your presence here is antagonising a large group of people, and we can't deal with all of them if they attack you or because your presence is antagonising them.
And let's not forget how they appear to turn a blind eye to the anti-Semitic projection on Big Ben. Jewish people in London are hostages in their own homes on the weekends. But it's not just the Palestine marches. The way they've handled environmental groups like Just Stop Oil has been woeful. I feel sorry for the officers, many of whom are passionate people committed to the role, but their leadership is rudderless. It's time for Mark Rowley to go. He's useless. Right, so before we get stuck into the debates over the next hour, let me introduce you to my clashers. Joining me going head-to-head in a clash of minds, former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider, and also former advisor to David Cameron, Philip Blond. Here's what else is coming up in this hour. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman is leading calls today for Metropolitan Police Chief Mark Rowley to quit over what she describes as a litany of failures in policing pro-Palestine rallies. Are you proud to be English? That's the question. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says that Labour must not flinch from flying the St George's flag and has declared that his party is the patriotic party now. There are also growing talks within Westminster of a general election as early as June. But does that give Rishi Sunak enough time to try to persuade voters to give his party one more chance? Drivers in London could face the reality of paying by the mile. This comes as the London Mayor aims to hit net zero targets. But how would you feel about paying per mile? A major London university has also broken equality law as they are reportedly banning or barring staff from promotion unless they support its pro-trans diversity policy. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Get in touch at gbnews.com/your say or tweet me at GBNews. Right, so let's welcome again to my clashers former advisor to David Cameron, Philip Blond, and also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Right, so let's get started. James, I'm going to start with you. What do you think? You've seen the litany of failures from the Metropolitan Police in particular, and even in such a short space of time that Mark Rowley has been at the head of it. Is it time for him to just relinquish his job?
I think the problems with the Met go much deeper than just who's in charge of it. I'm completely agnostic about whether he should go or not. I don't know, but I think the Met itself needs to change much more. It's perfectly possible that he could go and someone could come in and exactly the same things are happening. And as you say, of course, I don't have exactly the same understanding of all of the events as you laid out in your monologue, but the broad thrust that there are huge problems in the Met, I think, is undeniable. And if you think that and I think that, then that's probably the case.
We actually agree, my God.
Coming from different different directions. Of course, I think some of the things that we have seen, Gideon Falter being told that he had to leave because he's visibly Jewish is abhorrent, and that is, I mean, that's just a terrible, terrible, terrible breach of policing. Likewise, the swastika you showed, which seems like a lot of that is to do with training, and basically it seems like the two police officers in question there, they seem like they just don't really know what they're talking about. They haven't been told anything about the subject, or they were. It's
just hilarious.
It is extremely worrying. But I think the question should be, well, how's the training operate? How's that function? Rather than, the chief, whatever the commissioner, he's probably not terribly involved in.
So what's the point of him then? If he can't be held to account when things go wrong.
As I say, I'm perfectly fine for him to be held to account, but that alone won't change things. The problems, as you rightly said in your monologue, in report after report, have shown huge structural failings within the Met. So unless someone is going to say he should go and so should come in with this programme of reform which will make these very major structural changes, I'm not terribly interested in it. And to me, it seems the reason why it's being pushed is for a political purpose rather than for a policing purpose, which is Suella Braverman doesn't like the pro-Palestinian expression, which doesn't seem to be how that's been policed. In general terms, of course, we've seen two extremely terrible examples that you showed earlier, but in general terms, that's really not very high up on the list of mistakes that the Met has been making over recent years.
You don't think that's high up on the list? Philip Blond?
Well, where to begin? I think we all agree the Met is an ongoing disaster, and kind of Mark Rowley was appointed precisely to get grips with that disaster, and he hasn't. And I agree with Suella Braverman. I think he's taken the failures of the Met to a new level and expanded the spectrum of said failure. I think how the marches have been policed have been unbelievably bad. I mean, you could spend half an hour on it in your Vox Pop on the errors, sort of willfully interpreting the call to jihad as a call to yoga, Islamic yoga summer camps. It's half-educated, half-understood, botched understandings of the law, but he's presiding over that. And, I agree, the Met was dysfunctional before his appointment. It hired a lot of violent, racist police officers, many of whom have committed crimes, and that will roll on. But I think part of the problem is that his response to that has been reactive. He hasn't recognised that what we're seeing is two-tier policing, the marginalisation of a minority in London, the making unsafe of a whole community in London, which is a failure. Now, you might chart that failure to the mayoralty. You might chart it to the head of the Met. The government does have emergency powers where it can recover control of the police. And I think the level of failure within the Met, the inertia of Sadiq Khan vis-a-vis the Jewish community is really...
It's astonishing, isn't it?
It's astonishing, and it's sad, because I thought in a number of ways, he's an admirable figure, because he's also been attacked from within his own community for various stances he's taken. But I think this is a genuine failure as well, and I think he's failed policing. Policing has failed London, and Mark Rowley has failed. And I think we need to tackle those in turn radically, and the government needs to act.
Well, let's see what you think at home. Get in touch. Now, a Metropolitan Police spokesperson said, "We are aware of this video and fully acknowledge the worry that it has caused not only to those featured, but also everyone who watches it, and will review the circumstances. We have always said that we recognise the conflict between Israel and Hamas continues to be an issue of concern for many Londoners, and this includes the regular protests and marches in central London. Everyone has the right to travel throughout the capital in safety." Well, I mean, that would be the case, but if you're Jewish, I don't think you would dare go in there whilst those marches... And it's not...
That's not true. I go on the marches. I'm Jewish. There are lots of Jewish people on those marches.
But it's not...
A lot of the reason why people...
Excuse me. It's not that it's a one-off. It's that it's literally every weekend. And there are many Jewish people I know who won't go into central London.
So there are two things. The reason why the protests are every weekend is because the destruction of Gaza continues every day. And
that's okay.
And part of the reason, to protest, yes, of course, that's correct. And part of the reason
those protests a no-go zone for Jewish people.
They're not a no-go zone. They are not.
Many Jewish people would disagree with you there. Many disagree.
If you are told they are a no-go zone, sorry, no, please.
A no-go zone for people who take the ideological line of that the marchers take, and the police there saying that the gentleman wearing a yarmulke, being openly and visibly Jewish, and it's a bit like Black Lives Matter. When you had the Black Lives Matter protest, people on the left and others said, we've got to understand the black community on their own terms and what they say. What we have now is willful denial of the Jewish community that's speaking as a majority that we feel desperately unsafe in London.
That's what they're saying.
And we should take them on their own account.
We should take them on their account. Are you Jewish?
I am Jewish.
You don't feel unsafe, but there are many who do, and the majority
because we are told constantly from this channel and from all newspapers and so on and so forth that these are frightening places for Jewish people. I can tell you, having been on many of these marches with many Jewish people, they are not frightening at all for Jewish people. They are not. We are told that they are, and of course, if you're told that Central London is a no-go zone for you, that is frightening. So you will stay in your homes. That's not because it actually is.
Listen, you saw. Listen,
this is false.
If you're saying that, then why did the Metropolitan Police officer feel that he needed to protect the Jewish man who was wearing the kippah?
I don't think he wasn't protecting him. He was saying he was going to arrest him. He was saying he was going to arrest him. That's not protecting him.
He was saying to do that, to remove him from the situation because he said it was dangerous for him. If you listen to the reasoning, and that's the reasoning...
Well, and the reasoning is absurd. We all think that the way the police officer...
You've just said.
No, it doesn't.
Yes,
the way the police officer operated was terrible and also entirely wrong. I have been on the marches with people who are also visibly Jewish.
This is false consciousness claim again. The people who feel unsafe shouldn't feel unsafe, but they do feel unsafe, and it is an unsafe environment, and we should believe them, and we should hold the Met to account.
I think we should, but listen, what do you think? Now, but let's move on to this. Keep your thoughts coming, but Keir Starmer has declared that Labour is the patriotic party now, claiming that since the Tories have been in power, our pride and our national identity has become more and more contentious. He added that Labour must not flinch at flying the flag of St George ahead of St George's Day on Tuesday, declaring that the Tories have, quote, trashed the economy, hammered the mortgage holders here. What's that got to do with being British? Weakened the union and neglected our forces, and therefore had lost any right to call themselves a patriotic party. However, do you believe that Labour are the party of patriots? Well, joining me now is our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, Anna Riley. Anna, so talk to me.
Good afternoon, Nana. Yes, well, it's been a very patriotic day here in Morley in West Yorkshire. The town's actually been described as one of Northern England's most patriotic towns, and they've been celebrating St George's Day today, ahead of the big day on Tuesday. There's been a procession of 1,500 people that marched through the town, including cadets, including brownies, cubs, scouts, young people from sports groups, and they all came here to the rugby club, where there's been a lot of events going on throughout the day. I spoke to Alex Giles earlier. He's a member of the Royal Society for St George. This is what he had to say.
I come from a mixed heritage background. I'm half English and I'm half Indonesian and Filipino. So for me it's representing all my cultures really, and being British and being English is something I'm incredibly proud of. We've got a great history. When you look at England as a whole, we've accomplished so much for such a small island, and it's why shouldn't you be proud of it? And you wear the St George's flag or the Union Jack, you should wear that with pride and always remember those who have fallen for us and also fought for our freedoms.
So a lot of pride there from Alex for St George. I also spoke to Andrea Jenkins. She's the MP for Morley and Outwood. I spoke to her earlier just about the idea of what Keir Starmer had said, that the Conservatives weren't a patriotic party anymore, and that was something that she profoundly disagreed with. But it's been a brilliant turnout today, a great event, and definitely a lot of pride for England here in Morley.
Thank you so much, Anna. Lovely to talk to you. That's Anna Riley. So what do you think? Do you think Labour the party of patriotism? You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News online and on digital radio. Coming up, I'm asking, is pay per mile, is that scheme, is it the way forward? Next, though, I'm asking, are Labour a party of patriotism?
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
SUV drivers in Oxford will face higher parking charges. Proposals tabled by the local Green Party or passed by the City Council. The motion argues that heavier cars like SUVs cause more damage to roads, are more likely to seriously injure or kill pedestrians, and cause more illnesses due to pollution. However, the Alliance of British Drivers has condemned the plan as absolutely outrageous. Well, let's get the thoughts now of the legendary motoring journalist, Quentin Wilson. Quentin, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. We hear a lot about the war on motorists, this time targeting SUVs because of their weight, and the charges could be astronomical. This idea first started in Paris. Now it's coming to Oxford. Can you tell us a bit about how it would work?
OK, so the idea is that the charges will penalise people who drive heavier SUVs and I guess by implication electric cars, although Oxford Council haven't said exactly what they're going to do with EVs. But this is all based around this notion of SUVs being heavier than passenger cars, therefore wearing out the roads more. Now, there was a study, I've got it here in front of me, from the University of Edinburgh in 2022 that said real-world tests found that overwhelmingly the wear is caused by large vehicles, buses, heavy good vehicles. Road wear from cars and motorcycles is so low that this is immaterial. Now, obviously, driving around a medieval city like Oxford in an SUV isn't the brightest thing in the world to do. But the idea that we should penalise the owners of these cars based on imperfect science that's been read on social media, I think is completely wrong.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon. If you just joined us, welcome on board. It's just coming up to 27 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Well, just before the break, we were discussing whether Labour were the party of patriotism after Sir Keir Starmer declared that his is the patriotic party now, claiming that since the Conservatives have been in power, our pride and our national identity has become more and more contentious. So joining me for the clash, former advisor to David Cameron, Philip Blond, also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Philip, I'm going to start with you. Labour, they claim to be the party of patriotism.
Well, I think on one hand it's to be welcomed. I think Keir Starmer's right to do that. He's right to challenge those sort of on the left who just couldn't be called patriotic in any way, shape or form, and are quite hostile to Britain, to Britain's history. But I think it's to be welcomed that the Labour leaders made this point.
But do you believe him, though? Because he says a lot of things. I mean, he's a U-turner. We know.
I do believe him. And I do believe Labour can be a patriotic party. You can't deny that Blair was patriotic during his time. I don't think we want to deny our political enemies the grounds of consensus that make us a country. what I think he's got, so I welcome that, and I fully accept that many people on the left are deeply patriotic. But there are also a large number on the left who are not. And what I fear is that he will have a dreadful time controlling those people. And the forces of fracture that he talks about, I mean, he's right about the Conservatives undermining defence. They've done appalling. Since George Osborne, they haven't supported, they've hemorrhaged our armed forces. Where I would challenge that remark is that the left has been the site for the fragmentation of the country's solidarity through identity politics, racial politics, sexual politics.
So that's why I asked you to believe him. And also in their literature, they were worried that the flag of St George, would upset people and upset minorities. I've got to come to James on that. Do you believe Keir Starmer saying that they're now, and he does say now at the end?
I think neither party is particularly patriotic based on what they're putting forward. And I think saying that we're patriotic because we fly a flag, something that everybody does and almost everybody supports England and et cetera, or if you're Scottish, Scotland or so on. It's a bit patronising. Patriotic is supporting the people of the country, which I think he's right to say the Tories haven't done. But then if you were being really patriotic, you wouldn't say, well, we're happy to fly the flag. Of course you're happy to fly the flag. It's our country, of course you are. But what are you going to do to improve the things which have been undermined and trashed over the last 14 years? Like, what are you going to do about water? What are you going to do about our public services and our infrastructure? What are you going to do about armed forces pay, for example?
Actions speak louder than words.
Actions speak louder than words. And I think a lot of this it's a dressed-up little thing because a bit of the media will go, oh, well, that's interesting because he said he likes the flag and or maybe the left doesn't like the flag or whatever. It's not really borne out by reality. And really, we should be judging people by what they do. For example, he says now, well, one thing that you could do is you could have bank holidays for all of our National Saints' Days, 4 more bank holidays, and we could use those days to celebrate the cultural, scientific, artistic, sporting, intellectual achievements that the people of this country have had. That would be a good thing to show that we are, that we're patriotic in a positive, progressive, etc. type of way. But yeah, as you say, actions speak louder than words.
He's not offering any of that, though, is he? That's not what he's saying. He's just saying that we are, because he says so. And there's a couple of things that they've done, but there are many in his party who've demonstrated lack of it. And one of the things is he actually, didn't he ask for another referendum? I would say that the ultimate in patriotism was actually wanting to take control of our own borders and take control of our own country.
Look, I'll just repeat what I said. I welcome the Labour leader being patriotic. I personally believe him, but a substantial proportion of his population, of his party rather, have repudiated the British legacy and I think are genuinely hostile to the idea of Britishness, and I wish him good luck in containing them.
Well, you see the pro-Palestine lobby, or he has a faction of his party that are very pro-Palestine. He's got so many different elements.
So what's anti-British about opposing our arms being used in war crimes against another people?
No, we're talking about factions within a party.
No, I know, but you're presenting that as if that's going to be difficult for being patriotic. What's unpatriotic about not wanting British bombs and British bullets to be used to kill other people?
I suppose, well, that's not really it, is it? I suppose it's not supporting the government who is supporting British interests. And that's
I don't think the government are supporting British interests. Far from it.
A lot of people will disagree with you on that.
I think most people in the country, if you polled them, does not think the government supporting British interests. Patriotism is not supporting the government.
Ultimately, though, if that is what where the government and the direction of the majority of the country feel that is the way we should be going, then there are factions within this party that do not feel that way.
But hold on, but that doesn't make any sense. Patriotism is... No, it doesn't.
Just because you don't understand it. Just because you don't understand it.
Patriotism is not doing what the government wants. That's not what patriotism is.
The government is doing what the British public want.
The British public do not want arms sales to Israel. The English people don't want arms sales to Israel.
Again, that's
if you look at the polls. Well, if you look at the poll,
where have you seen that? Where have you seen that the British people are not supporting the war in Israel?
Well, look at the most recent polls from YouGov, for example. We can pull them up in the advert break.
All right, well, why don't you find them before
sure.
you make those statements, because you don't actually have those figures.
I do have those. I mean, I do have those figures. That's accurate. The most recent poll shows that the majority of people, I think off the top of my head, it was 54%, and then we'll check it in a moment.
The British public support Britain standing up for British interests.
Exactly.
Overwhelmingly, and they support actions against terrorists and against states hostile to us. Of which Hamas are both.
There you have it. Is that good enough for you?
No,
right.
It's
This
wrong.
is the clash. It's not
Actually wrong.
It's not wrong. He's absolutely
Hamas aren't terrorists and Hamas aren't hostile to British interests. That's actually wrong.
That isn't what I said. I think what's hostile to British interests...
That is exactly what I said.
What is hostile to British interests is arming a state that commissions breaches of international law. I think that is contrary to British interests.
Who is breaching international law? It's Hamas.
Israel is breaching international law, and we arm them. Hamas breach international law, but we don't arm them, do we? We don't arm them, we don't give them our bullets, we don't give them our technology, we don't give them our diplomatic cover. But we do to Israel.
We arm those who are resisting terrorism. Hamas are a terrorist organisation who engaged in an unprecedented atrocity against civilians, and they deserve to be expunged from the earth.
OK, so that's the final word. What do you think? gbnews.com/your say. Coming up, we'll be speaking to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Duddridge, to get the latest on what's going on in the United States. Trump and Biden's uncle being eaten by cannibals? You must stay for that, please. But first, let's get your latest news.
It's 56%, not 54%. Back.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I don't think you can go and watch a Shakespeare play unless you already know it. It's almost like you have to understand the story and the characters, and perhaps have even done a bit of reading into it. Because if you went completely blind, especially in today's world where we don't speak in that kind of way, it is, I think, probably a bit alienating.
But Dawn is saying it is alienating at the moment because of the lack of representation.
You know, the actual phrasing they use, right, OK, the disproportionate representation propagated white, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender male narratives. I'm sure there's people sitting in a room going, what's the most ridiculous thing we can come up with today?
Yes.
But really, just chuck all these words at it, cisgender, and it's just insane. Of course, Shakespeare was what it was back in the day, and that's why it's mostly blokes and they're mostly white.
And lots of speculation that he was actually gay, isn't there? Because he never really saw Anne Hathaway very often and stayed away a lot of the time. I don't know, maybe he was a big
He might have been
icon.
transgender for all I know. I mean, I don't...
Biggins, I'm looking at you.
No, I think you're right. I mean, you know, I think that goes for the profession too. I mean, I do think I mean, I remember seeing Macbeth in London with Judi Dench and Ian McKellen, and it was one of the most exciting evenings ever. And it was a cold night at the Donmar Theatre, outside and inside, and that gave it atmosphere. There are certain things that you go along and see something else, and you think, I'll walk out in the interval.
Yeah. Macbeth is a sexy play, though.
Let's talk about, there's so many. Can I live to be 100?
Oh, this is depressing.
I think it is depressing. I like to stay here now. I don't want to live to 100.
Don't say that.
I'm right behind you.
I don't even want to. My father died at 63. That'll be me gone this year.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. If you just tuned in, where have you been? It's coming on to 37 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Keep all your thoughts coming as well. gbnews.com/your say. I'd love to hear what you think. But there are growing talks within Westminster of a general election as early as June. But does that give Rishi Sunak enough time to try to persuade voters to give his party just one more chance? Autumn has always seemed like the aim of the Tories, with the hope by this stage interest rates would continue to fall, flights to Rwanda would finally take off, and tax announcements could be made in the autumn statement. So what do you think? Is it finally time for Rishi to call that general election in the summer? Do you care? Right, let's welcome again to Michael Ashes, former advisor to David Cameron, Philip Blond, also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. James Schneider, is it time to call for a general election? Does he need to do it now?
I mean, he doesn't have to do it now. He can do it until January. I'm not that bothered. They're going to lose the election regardless. I think, you know, even if they get those three things that you put in, it's copium. I mean, I don't think there will be a summer election. I've always thought they will take it almost the last possible date, because that's what governments that think they're going to lose do, because they can always hope that maybe there will be jam tomorrow, maybe something will come up, maybe Keir Starmer will do something so atrocious that people will decide that they would rather...
Like eat cake at a party.
But I think it's... but to be honest, I don't think it really matters one way or the other. The Tories are going to get thrown out because most people are worse off than they were 14 years ago, and the country's in a worse state.
So do you think he should hang on then to the last minute, or should...
I'm not his advisor. It's not for me to say. I think he will have an election in the autumn, and I think they'll get voted out in a big way.
All right, Philip Blond.
Well, I mean, there's talk now that the greatest likelihood of a vote of no confidence is after the May elections. And he's always used the idea he'll go for an election now to try to control his party. But the febrile state of the Conservative Party, the appalling level of support that he has as a Prime Minister, the catastrophic nature of the defeat. On some measures, it's below 100 seats, which then suggests there could be 2 or 3 elections, even if it goes well, from recovering to form a party or government again. I think we may be in a situation of a no-confidence vote after the locals. Then I think he just will have had enough. And the rumours abound about he just is quite fragile and will just throw his hand in. Then we'll have another leadership election. And the hope is that a coherent set of policies, which we haven't had. We've had kind of second or third order things like stop smoking and study maths, which doesn't enthuse the masses. If we have a first order election where people can make choices in primary colours, I think the chance under a leader with a strong vision of lessening the scale of defeat is real. And I think enough MPs might be willing now finally to take that chance.
So you're saying that potentially somebody should take the helm at some point before there is a general election?
Yes,
to minimise the defeat. But who would, in their right mind, would want to take that chalice?
Because I think that any leader who narrowed the margin of the defeat, got over 150 seats, would be in power for the next 5 years in terms of leader of the opposition. What they're arguing for now is where we fight from after this defeat, and what sort of conservatism do we have? The liberal conservatism that had been followed by Osborne and Cameron has been an unprecedented failure. It has left people more economically insecure, more culturally marginalised, and the country fragmented. Conservatism needs to rediscover itself in something other than the same old liberal offer. And that's what I hope will be on offer if there is indeed a leadership election.
Well, listen, coming up, my monologue on Sir Keir Starmer. He declared that Labour is a patriotic party. Do you believe him? But next I'm asking, is pay per mile, is that scheme the way forward?
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after another sunny day for most of us, there is a further cloud and rain on the way, all thanks to an area of low pressure well up to the north of the UK, but bringing these weak frontal systems that will sink their way southwards through the rest of the day. We do still have high pressure around, but that slowly slips away towards the northwest. So the cloudiest skies through the rest of today, definitely for eastern parts of Scotland, northern England, and slowly sinking their way southwards across much of the UK through the early hours of Monday morning. Western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland generally staying that little bit drier, but it's southern and eastern parts of England that will see those clear skies and some chilly temperatures with some frost in places, but not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain. That does mean that Monday starts a much cloudier day for most of us, particularly compared to the weekend, with the outbreaks of rain that we see through the morning slowly slipping their way southwards as we go through the rest of the day. Not turning particularly heavy, but definitely cloudier and a much damper day than we saw over the weekend. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon and feeling quite warm across much of Scotland, highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely chillier under all that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Monday and into the start of Tuesday, that weak frontal system eventually clears its way towards the southeast, leaving a bright start for many of us with plenty of sunshine through Tuesday morning. Southern and eastern parts still staying quite cloudy with outbreaks of rain, and there'll be further showers through Tuesday and Wednesday as well, and further hints of something more unsettled through the second half of the week.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's just coming up to 45 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, just some breaking news to bring you about Mark Menzies, who has now announced that he will not stand in the next election, announcing in a statement, he said, "It has been an enormous privilege representing the people of Field since 2010, but due to the pressures on myself and my elderly mother, I've decided to resign from the Conservative Party and will not stand at the forthcoming general election. This has been a very difficult week for me, and I request that my family's privacy is respected." Well, let's welcome to my clashes and get their views. Former advisor to David Cameron, Philip Blond, also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Philip Blond. He's decided to step down after the mess.
What a mess. What a travesty. What an embarrassment. What a disaster. I mean, I don't know how else to say it.
Bad people.
Well, bad people. You know, I mean, it'll be a line in British politics for getting £5,000 from now until the future.
I think it's 6,500 it went up to.
Poor quality of selection, increasingly socially dysfunctional people selected as MPs with very peculiar proclivities. You know, and then they engage in this.
Well, of course, he's denied everything, hasn't he? So there's no evidence.
After another one of his colleagues...
Well, OK, either one.
Another one of his colleagues shared details of people's...
numbers,
phone numbers.
William Ragg, that was William, yeah.
some, again, peculiar sexual establishments. I mean, my God.
I think this was something to do with something that he'd sent to somebody else, but I don't know. I mean, what is this, James?
I mean, Philip's right, both that it's extremely embarrassing and that we have a really low-grade quality of MPs. Of course, there are some that are...
You're going to include Angela Rayner in there?
I wouldn't include Angela Rayner in that, no. But of course, there are some who are very good. But we have far too large a number of MPs that have kind of narcissistic, without any qualities to go with it, and basically shouldn't be allowed to run offices, manage staff, and get themselves in the kind of terrible trouble. I mean, it's...
Predicaments, should we call them?
There are just so many of them. There's the one that was doing the gambling thing that's had to go. There's a by-election. There was the one that was supposedly looking up tractors, and it wasn't tractors in the chamber. I mean... It's an embarrassing list.
It's embarrassing, but let's be honest, Labour have had their fair share as well. I mean, I think this brings it up to 19 now, doesn't it? 18 or 19.
Parties don't select for talent. They select for compliance.
True.
And they don't like talented people. They like average people who they can control, who will be on compliant in the face of the whips. And that is the predominant reason why there are some superb MPs. We have very poor quality MPs.
You're not wrong, really not wrong. But let's move on to this one. Drivers in London could face the reality of paying by the mile following London Mayor Sadiq Khan's revealing documents. It aims to hit net zero targets, which are ambitious plans for decarbonisation. How many times have we heard that word? Where it was said that only to be possible by charging drivers. Reportedly, the London Mayor has previously been adamant that he has ruled out introducing paper mile schemes. But how do you feel about paper mile? And let's be honest here, we know that if it's in London, it'll probably go out to the rest of the country. What do you think, James?
We already have paper mile. It's in petrol tax. I don't have a problem with that principle at all. I think, in fact, that's a good thing, and we should be decarbonising. I do have a problem
What do you mean it's in petrol tanks? Do you mean when we buy...
Petrol tax, sorry. As in,
petrol tax.
the more you drive...
I thought you said tanks.
The more you drive, the more you pay in... You
need more petrol. You are paying
per
But that's
mile.
just buying the petrol. Right. That's not specifically...
Yeah, precisely. And I think that's a good thing, and we should be decarbonising. I find the idea that the government is going to track everywhere that your car goes a bit weird and dystopian, and I don't like that at all. So I wouldn't like to have a GPS tracking of all cars so the government always knows where you are. I'm perfectly happy for people to be taxed on how much they're driving, which is what we already have, because we have a petrol tax. If your car consumes more petrol, you pay more per mile.
Philip Blond.
Look, I support the green agenda. I support decarbonisation. I think it's desperately needed. But what we've done is we made ordinary working-class people predominantly pay the burden of that transformation. We've managed to make the green agenda unpopular by placing the burden far too much on the lives of ordinary people. You can't simply tax cars where there's no decent public transport. You can't simply... You've now got a situation where it's so expensive to travel on the railways, it's a third cheaper to travel by yourself in the car. And the answer isn't to increase the cost of car travel, because it just penalises people who need it. We've got to reverse this penalty on the common person that the green agenda means. The green approach, like carbon tariffs, for instance, could price in a whole new industrial revolution that would benefit our ordinary people. But turning it into compulsion and taxation is a very, very bad idea. Like the drive for electric vehicles, they're more polluting because the weight and the fracture of the tyres.
Well, the carbon is actually elsewhere.
And they're more expensive.
Well, they're more expensive. The carbon is elsewhere, so we don't count it in this country.
It's imperative we make this agenda popular. And the thrust against making it unpopular is one of the worst policy-owned goals I've seen. So I'm against paper mile for that reason.
Well, it seems that those with the smallest shoulders are paying the most, and they are probably the least polluting. Because if you think about it, those really rich people going on their Bombardier jets, like a lot of them preaching about climate change, are actually using the most amount of carbon. So, you know, I get it, but I actually don't really agree with the agenda. I don't believe in the full sort of scientific reality of it. I think that there are other factors, and I think there are other ways of considering and other ways of dealing with it. Right, so let's move on. A major London university may have broken equality law by barring staff from promotion unless they support its pro-trans diversity policy. A barrister has found that King's College is potentially discriminatory against those who believe there are only two sexes and that trans people are not the gender they identify as. So let me welcome again to my clash as former advisor to David Cameron, Philip Blond, and also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Philip Blond.
Yeah, I've read the article, and this seems, again, very dystopian and does seem to be in contravention of the Equalities Act, where being gender critical is allowed and respected. And what we find is a lot of these institutions have gone along with Stonewall, that produced fake legal advice that wasn't lawful, and puts them on a rewarding scale that they attempt to follow.
Although they would argue that that's their sort of policies and that it's not really about legality. James, what do you think?
So it's a may, because we don't know. You know, one barrister, I think, who's representing one side has put forward a legal judgment, and it's hard to know precisely what the KCL is putting forward. But I think we should draw quite a big distinction between basic academic freedom and more where you're looking after students, or you're a head of year, or you're in charge of a tutor group or something like that, where one of those things I can see you should have being maximally inclusive so that students feel comfortable, blah, blah, blah. And then the other one, you want to maximise academic freedom, and that does include people's critical views that you don't agree with. Now, I don't agree with gender-critical views, but I don't think that a maths professor shouldn't get a promotion as a maths professor. Do I think that they maybe shouldn't be teaching if they are, offensive about it, treating trans students or whatever? Then yes, that's a separate thing. But their basic academic position should be separated out from the pastoral one.
Right. Well, listen, a King's College spokesperson said, "We're proud of the work that we've done to build an inclusive atmosphere on campus in collaboration with our staff, networks and EDI, that dreaded word, experts. Academic staff applying for promotion choose how they provide evidence to support their individual applications against a range of specific criteria in line with employment and higher education regulations. We regularly review all university policies to ensure compliance with changing laws." Well, that's what they say. What do you think? You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, the Great British Debate. I'm asking, is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome or something of its ilk? Joining me, the fabulous Danny Kelly and also Christine Hamilton. You won't want to miss them. Stay tuned, do not go anywhere. But first, let's get your latest weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after another sunny day for most of us, there is a further cloud and rain on the way, all thanks to an area of low pressure well up to the north of the UK, but bringing these weak frontal systems that will sink their way southwards through the rest of the day. We do still have high pressure around, but that slowly slips away towards the northwest. So the cloudiest skies through the rest of today, definitely for eastern parts of Scotland, northern England, and slowly sinking their way southwards across much of the UK through the early hours of Monday morning. Western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland generally staying that little bit drier, but it's southern and eastern parts of England that will see those clear skies and some chilly temperatures with some frost in places, but not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain. That does mean that Monday starts a much cloudier day for most of us, particularly compared to the weekend, with the outbreaks of rain that we see through the morning slowly slipping their way southwards as we go through the rest of the day. Not turning particularly heavy, but definitely cloudier and a much damper day than we saw over the weekend. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon and feeling quite warm across much of Scotland, highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely chillier under all that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Monday and into the start of Tuesday, that weak frontal system eventually clears its way towards the southeast, leaving a bright start for many of us with plenty of sunshine through Tuesday morning. Southern and eastern parts still staying quite cloudy with outbreaks of rain, and there'll be further showers through Tuesday and Wednesday as well, and further hints of something more unsettled through the second half of the week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You're watching and listening to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. More to come in the next hour. I'll start with my monologue on Sir Keir Starmer.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. For the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Coming up, my monologue, my thoughts on St George's Day and Sir Keir Starmer's claim that Labour are the party of patriotism now. Today on Outside, my guest is a woman who was most famous for being an Olympic world champion, but she's also worked closely with the infamous former First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, and Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham. Who is she? Then in Supplement Sunday, where my panel and I discuss some of the news stories that caught their eyes. Lots of exciting discoveries. But first, let's get your latest news with Sophia.
Now,
Nana, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour. Mark Menzies has announced his resignation from the Tory party, saying he won't be standing at the next election. The Fylde MP was suspended following claims he used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who had locked him in a flat. He disputes the allegations. Following an investigation, the Conservative Party says it can't conclude there was a misuse of funds, but said there was a pattern of behaviour that falls below the standards expected of MPs. British Jewish leaders will meet the Metropolitan Police Commissioner later this week after accusing the force of a series of high-profile errors. Sir Mark Rowley is facing calls to quit over his handling of pro-Palestinian protests, with the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, suggesting he's emboldened anti-Semites. The Board of Deputies of British Jews says mistakes have a devastating effect on the previously high level of trust held in the police. The campaign against anti-Semitism is also calling for Sir Mark to resign or be sacked after its chief executive was described as openly Jewish by an officer. Cabinet Minister Claire Coutinho says the government is addressing the incident.
The Home Secretary has made clear that what happened was unacceptable. I understand there's going to be a meeting in the coming days. I don't know what conversation is going to take place there. I think we should see how that conversation goes. But ultimately, what's really important is that people in the Jewish community feel safe. They know that we're on their side, and that what we want to see is equal policing in this country, and also to make sure that they can go about their normal lives. That's what I want to see.
A decision by the US to approve £49 billion in aid for Ukraine has been welcomed by the UK, with the Foreign Secretary describing it as a vital step forward. After months of wrangling, American politicians ended a deadlock, agreeing to provide a package which will also help replenish weapons and munitions. President Zelensky says the move will keep the war from expanding and will save thousands of lives. It now heads to the Senate, which is expected to pass the bill in the next few days. 20 million people were plagued by antisocial behaviour and vandalism last year, according to new figures. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Coopers says a Labour government would crack down on yobs. She promised the party would get tough to restore community safety. Former police officer Oliver Lawrence says more policy isn't the answer.
More legislation, more policy, more procedure isn't going to fix it. I would argue that we've got more than enough with more than 32 pieces of legislation already out there. What we need is proper enforcement and proper execution of the legislation by our justice system to make sure that we have penalties for people that commit these crimes in our communities.
In other news, thousands of people have been gathering for a vigil on Bondi Beach to remember those who died in a stabbing attack in Sydney. 6 people.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
6 people were killed by Joel Cauchi in a shopping centre last Saturday. The attacker was shot dead by police. Australia's Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, said, "May those we have lost rest in eternal peace forever in our hearts." A record 50,000 people are running the London Marathon. Many have now crossed the finishing line after completing the 26.2-mile route. Supporters are still out and about, though, cheering those on who are still making their way through the city streets. They started just after 10 a.m, the event raising millions of pounds for charities. Professional athletes kicked off the event, with Kenyan Alexander Munyeo winning the race in 2 hours and 4 minutes. In the women's category, Olympic champion Perez Jepchirchir set a new world record. Also Kenyan finished in 2 hours, 16 minutes and 16 seconds. She says she was surprised by her achievement.
Feeling grateful. I'm so happy, unbelievable. I was not expecting that. It means a lot for me because last year I was expecting to win, but unfortunately I didn't win. I was third, but I was happy too. But this year I'm so happy.
And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. It's just coming up to 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Sir Keir Starmer said that we must not flinch at flying the St George's flag. He declared that Labour is the patriotic party now. Was this the same Labour Party whose MPs recently criticised the use of St George's flag on the party's campaign materials because they were concerned it would put off ethnic voters? A flag won't put people off, it's your policies we're interested in. That's what may or may not put people off. As if ethnic voters are that simple and shallow. But Labour's got a form for lacking patriotism. Remember good old Jeremy Corbyn? He was criticised for not singing the national anthem at the Battle of Britain Memorial Service. Emily Thornberry and her snobby attitude towards people flying the flag of St George, remember that? And even though in 2022 Sir Keir Starmer insisted that the national anthem be sung at party conference, he seemed quite happy to hand our sovereignty back to the UK. He wanted a second referendum. The BBC, our national broadcaster, dropped the national anthem, so we now play it every morning here on GB News. And how many times have we heard the desire to drop Rule Britannia from the last night of the proms? And you only need to look at big sporting brands like Nike daring to manipulate, redefine and recolour our flag to suit their own ends. What they did to the England flag on the new kit was, in my view, nothing short of vandalism. On Tuesday, it's St George's Day. That's April the 24th. And I think it's about time we stop talking ourselves down and celebrate this great nation. After all, every other part of the United Kingdom proudly celebrate their day. The Welsh fly their flag of St David and are not afraid to be patriotic. The Irish with St Patrick's Day, which is a national holiday, and you always know about it because it's been etched into the psyche. The 17th of March, Irish pubs here in England paint the town green, which is actually my favourite colour. The Scottish are truly patriotic with St Andrew's Day. Having lost a referendum only yesterday, there were fresh calls for independence. Their love of their nation and self-governance is clear. But here in England, we've lost our identity. And being called a patriot is a dirty word. Excuse me. It's like being called a racist. Instead of talking our country up, we seem to talk ourselves down. There was a time when the flag of St George and the Union Jack were commandeered by far-right extremist groups who would fly it as their banner. But these days are long behind us. We have reclaimed it. Our flag is a symbol of our national identity, and it's time to make England great again. So before we get stuck into debates, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome type thing? The Prime Minister has been urged to bolster government defence spending after Israel was attacked by Iranian strikes. Global tensions are on the rise and the UK is without an air defence system. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome? Then at 4:50, it's World View. We'll go live to Israel and get the latest with Uri Geller. Plus, we'll cross over to Los Angeles with Paul Dudridge and get the latest on Trump and Biden's uncle, who was reportedly eaten by cannibals. I wonder what that's about. Or maybe it's something that Joe Biden has said, and, well, we'll come to that. Then at 5, it's this week's Outside. She is a former Olympic and world champion who had an extraordinary career in BMX racing. That's coming up in the next hour. Any idea who she might be? Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbnews.com/your say or tweet me at GBNews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly and author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Right, so I'm going to come to you, Christine Hamilton, first. Yes. Christine, nice to see you.
Thank you.
What do you think of this? You know, we don't really... Like, when you say April the 24th, I have to do a double think and think, so, what is it? Oh, it's St George's Day.
St George's Day. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the English are afraid of their patriotism. They're frightened of it. They seem to think that if you celebrate English patriotism, you're automatically saying that, you know, everything was wonderful, slavery was wonderful, etc., that you accept unreservedly everything that happened in English history. Rubbish. You're proud of your country today. And I think there's nothing wrong. By the way, that Welsh flag that was shown, it wasn't the flag of St David, but it doesn't matter. It's the flag of St David was slightly different. I don't want any Welsh viewers to be offended about that. No, I proudly, normally, I mean, I'm wearing my patriotic colours today, rather deliberately, by the way.
What's with the green?
Well, the green is just a contrast.
It's the Irish in
Honestly,
It's the Irish
well,
in
it's
me.
the Irish. Oh, dear, you can't win, can you? No, but obviously we've got a flagpole at home, which was our 25th wedding anniversary from my brother and sister-in-law, and we proudly fly every day the Union flag, this flag, as it were, and then on special days we fly the Welsh flag, the Scottish flag, and when we have people staying from foreign parts, we fly the American, the Italian, the whatever. I love flags, and I think they're a wonderful demonstration of patriotism, and I don't think anybody will ever forget, you mentioned her, Emily Thornberry, sneering at White Man Van with his St George's flag, and I hope that comes out during the election. They should never be allowed to forget that. And it's all very well for Starmer to jump on the bandwagon now, but it's a bit late.
It's a bit late, apparently, Danny.
If India Willoughby came for lunch, would you fly the trans flag for him?
I don't think India would accept an invitation, and one certainly wouldn't be offered.
All right, Emily Thornberry.
Don't be silly, Dan.
Emily Thornberry, right? That was 10 years ago. How time flies. Emily Thornberry. That was everything.
No
that
one forgets, though, do
No, of
they?
course not. That encapsulated the sneering approach and contempt she had for. And I tell you who she had contempt for: working class patriots. That's who she can't compute everything about this situation. There was a white transit van on a driveway on a council estate outside some bloke's house. I think there was a World Cup on, so that was why they were flying the flags, and there were 3 St George's flags. And she couldn't compute in her Islington brain how anyone who potentially was going to vote Labour stereotypically could be a patriot. And Starmer's got to sort of reverse this. He really has. He's got to reverse it. There's an association with the far right, but I think you'll find there's an association with national flags with the far right in every country. If you go to Spain, the far right will fly the Spanish flag in general. But in Spain, people don't sneer at normal, everyday people who fly the national flag. The problem with the St George's flag, in my humble opinion, is that it's a very ugly flag, and it
You
weathers.
don't like the flag?
No, I think the Union Jack.
I think it's really pretty.
What, a red cross on a white background?
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Well, I just
I'm
think
thinking
it's
of a nice
boring.
dress. If I
Boring.
It's dull.
No,
it's
but if I
boring.
have, I'm thinking of like an outfit with that. So I have it sort of long waist.
You
and I have that.
the Union Jack, Jerry.
I've got one of those actually. I've got one of those as well.
I've got one too, but I bet
you bought it for me.
I bet you
You bought it for me.
But it weathers far too easily, so it looks scruffy.
I
You
wish
keep
I'd
out-
worn it
you
today
keep it
now.
out for a week and it rains. The English flag looks tired and tatty.
How
and my
dare
view
you?
is
How very dare you?
the Union Jack.
What do you make of
vibrant?
What do you make of Nike doing what they did then to the England strip then, Danny? Seeing as you're a footy fan.
Well, first of all, it's Nike. Rather than
No,
Nike.
I say
you
Nike.
say Nike, do you?
I do.
OK, I didn't really have a problem with that. Because
it's purple. It's almost like I think they've done sort of a rainbow sort of
I didn't really
diversity and inclusion flag.
You know, I'm not really across all of this social media spats. I don't have a problem with that. But then I understand the point of people who protested because it represents the country. OK, now, and the people who say, well, what about UKIP? They've got a purple Union Jack. Yeah, but they're not representing the country.
Exactly.
You know, the Union Jack is on the English kit, and that's a representation of the country. So I completely get the objections.
I get your point about the English flag being a bit boring. The flag that comes out top of the pops all over the world is the Welsh flag. It gets best flag, best flag, best flag by a country mile.
I think the Union Jacks are remarkable.
I love the Union Jack.
No, I love it.
think
I
that's
love it. I'm
great.
just saying, as a matter of fact, the Welsh flag comes out on top if you do polls about it.
It's quite original, isn't it? And if you like, it looks nice in outfits. Here I am again with clothes. But I just think it does look good, and it is iconic, isn't it? And it is very, very British.
You'll see American kids wearing Union Jack themed stuff. You'll see Argentinian kids, French kids.
I think it's one of the most memorable as well.
Every time I see the Union flag, it's not a Jack unless it's on a Jack stuff, but never mind. I'm being so pedantic.
What is wrong with you, Christine?
I know, but every time I see it, it really inspires me. I mean, a great whoosh of patriotism.
Made iconic worldwide by the Rolling Stones, I would have thought.
Of course,
because of the album covers.
Yeah, but I'm super proud of it. I'm super proud of being English, and I'm super proud of the United Kingdom. Even if our Parliament seems to be, oh God, let's not talk about
British, not English.
I'm going
I'm English and British.
I'm not 100%.
I'm going to be the only person who won't say super instead of very. It's a contagion, and I'm not catching it. Lots of people say that.
What's wrong with... Is it an Americanism?
5 years ago you wouldn't have said that. It's just peculiar. Lots of people are saying...
What are you saying? Is it because... I would have. It's an Americanism, yes?
Yes, but I bet you wouldn't have said it 5 years ago.
I would have done. I used to live in New Jersey.
I think it came over the last 2 or 3 years.
No. I used to live in New Jersey. I used to go...
In Jersey?
I used to live in Jersey. Everything was super good.
OK, well, look, if you lived in Jersey, you could say it. Why are you saying it, young lady, on my right?
Say it.
You said super proud.
Did I? Oh, gosh, I'm
God, this is degenerating. Listen, if
Shall
you
we
just
start again? Rewind and
please
start
don't.
again.
I don't think I can put up with that again. Listen, if you just joined us, welcome on board. It's just coming up to 17 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Don't forget you can download the GB News app, or you can watch us stream the show live on YouTube. Now, coming up, it's Worldview time. We'll cross live to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge, and also Mr. Fire Uri Geller to get the latest on what's going on around the world. But next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome? I've got a poll up right now on X asking you that very question. Is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome? Send me your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. Tell me what you think. Cast your vote now. That's on the way.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Is it OK to call people fat? I won't call Bev fat because she isn't. She won't call me fat because I'm not. But the fitness fanatic, Derek Evans, you might know him better as 90s icon Mr Motivator, recently told a podcast diabetes have gone through the roof. You should be able to call people fat.
Well, he joins us now. Good morning, Derek. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great to see you. So I think what you're getting at is this idea that we've become so polite about weight that we're ignoring the elephant in the room. If you'll forgive the phraseology there, and actually sometimes you've got to be cruel to be kind.
Well, actually, this has been taken out of all context. I actually didn't say you're entitled to call people fat. What I did say is that in the 80s and 90s, I remember the way I got into television, there was a gentleman walking at reception while I was waiting for the people I was training. And for some reason, I got up and I prodded him in the belly. And I said to him, you need to deal with that. That was fat. We have a nation where obesity, diabetes is killing every one of us. And unless we take responsibility for our health, rather than waiting for government to do this, government to do that, it is our responsibility, right, to look after our independence and our health. And as we get older, it's even more critical, right? And that's why I'm here as an example saying to you, listen, I'm 71 years of age and movement is medicine. And you can't sit around watching television and not going out to the gym or wherever. You will never, ever be able to look after your family and everything you've worked for. You will lose it. I've never seen a deposit account behind a hearse. No matter what you work for, the most important thing you can do with your life is every hour, do something active. Every hour.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 20 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, some of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts. We're talking about patriotism and Keir Starmer. Pat says, Starmer, patriotic with his lot. Have you forgotten white van man? It makes me want to vomit. He will do and say anything to get a vote. That's what Pat says. Valerie says, isn't it strange that a couple of years ago, Keir Starmer had his hands on the shoulder of Jeremy Corbyn, a known Britain hater? Is there any backside? He won't crawl up to get the vote. Apologies if you're offended, Keir. That one was a bit harsh. Then Bruce says the left relentless campaign against everything British, and in particular the English, is all-pervading, and summed up by Emily Thornberry. That's what you think. Keep your thoughts coming. But now it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome? Well, the leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, thinks so, and she feels so strongly about it that she broke ranks to urge the Prime Minister to consider it. And last weekend, Iran fired over 300 drones and ballistic missiles into Israel, and all but a few were intercepted by the country's Iron Dome defence system. Ms Mordaunt said, to those that say about our defence ambitions, we can't do, shouldn't do or can't afford to do, I say look to Israel, a nation a fraction of our size that has staved off an attack from a nation 10 times its, and it has made a choice. It has made it work, and we may not have its daily reminders of the threats we face, but we have the same duty to our citizens. Well, interesting stuff. The recent attack on Israel has highlighted to the West the importance of air defence. Even a sophisticated system like Israel's wasn't enough to intercept the strike completely. Our friends and foes are ramping up their defence spending, whilst our government has whittled spending on our armed forces down to 2% of GDP. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time for the UK to build something like an Iron Dome, at least? Well, I'm joined now by James Schneider, former Labour advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, Philip Blond, former advisor to David Cameron, and Tobias Elwood, Conservative MP for Bournemouth East and former chairman of the Defence Select Committee. Well, I'm going to start with you, Tobias. Is Penny right? And I understand that we probably wouldn't use an exact same system as an Iron Dome, but the principle of what she's saying.
Yeah, certainly. As you described, what happened in the Middle East will raise concerns as to whether we have such a similar capability in the UK. And as you alluded to, we have entered a new era of insecurity, and whoever wins the next general election will need to spend more on defence. The question is how and what? What do we actually need? What are the actual threats that are coming over the horizon? Bear in mind, we're part of NATO, so anything that's emerging, missiles or drones from the east, would fly over friendly forces as well. And of course, the war at the moment in Europe is in Ukraine, and we've done brilliantly in sending our equipment to there, because that's where the fight currently is. But the Army has capabilities, as does the Navy and indeed the RAF, to protect our skies right now. The Army has something called Sky Sabre, which is a short to medium range anti-aircraft, anti-missile system. The Navy has Sea Viper, which we've seen in use in the Red Sea, taking down those Houthi drones. Also shortly introduced something called Dragonfire, which quite incredible, state-of-the-art, high-density laser beams, which I think is a sign of the future. And then finally, it's worth mentioning the RAF has two bases, Coningsby and Lossiemouth, in North Scotland, on quick reaction alert, able to scramble typhoons in a matter of minutes to take down any defence air attacks that may come in. Types of attacks that actually participated, as you implied, when the Iranians sent their missiles and drones to heading towards Israel.
Because as I understand it, the reason why it wouldn't be an Iron Dome system is because that is really for sort of closer range missile strikes, which Israel face on a daily basis. So it's the perfect system to protect them from kind of localised fire. But if it was, say, a ballistic missile or one of the other type missiles, it would need to be taken down well before it got anywhere into UK airspace. And I'm just wondering, what capabilities do we have the capabilities to do that, Tobias?
Yes, I just listed three capabilities:
but
the
we
Army,
definitely
the Air
have that.
Force, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy. What I think we are going to need in the future is how do we counter a rogue drone attack, for example, that's launched in the Dover Straits, for example. That's the sort of thing that we need to be prepared for. As you allude to, the reason why Israel is so good at this is because they've had to persistently protect themselves from those Hamas rockets over decades. And that's why they've perfected this system, which is very much localized as such. Where the world is going, absolutely, it will be part and parcel of any wider discussion as to how we make sure that we protect Britain's interests, both here and indeed overseas. Because we'll need to not only have these systems here in the UK, but also in our territories and indeed in our interests elsewhere.
OK, James Schneider.
I think that we should have defence systems that are the type that we need, not ones that are from very different contexts. As exactly as you're saying, the Iron Dome works in its particular context in Israel, where it is geographically and with the enemies that it has. It's not really relevant to Britain. So I think this so-called bold breaking ranks intervention by Penny Mordaunt is really not terribly much to do with how we defend ourselves in the future, and is much more about what future job she would like to have leading her party.
Well, but Tobias pointed out that you could have things being fired to us from a localised space rather than from a long range, and we haven't got anything to protect ourselves from anything like that. And even though you might not foresee that we would have any sort of argument with our partners and so on and so forth, I don't suppose Ukraine thought that Russia would attack after we all signed the Budapest memorandum, but they did.
I think there were lots of people in Ukraine that did think that Russia was a potential military threat, and they turned out to be correct. I think we should have defences that defend our country that are right for what we need. I mean, of course, that needs to have some speculation into the future, but it seems to me that things like cyber are much more likely to be a serious threat than, an armada of drones coming from France or something.
Did you see what happened to Israel? I mean, because that wasn't cyber, that was an armada of drones, just as you've...
Yes, but with it, as I said, Israel has a very different context where it is geographically and with its opponents than what we have.
Well,
so
but things,
if I were in Israel,
all the time. But...
If we were sitting in an Israeli TV studio, I would say that the Iron Dome for Israel is an extremely good thing, and of course that they should invest in it. But we're not sitting in Tel Aviv. We're sitting here in London, and so we should have defence systems which are relevant to our context.
I think you should maybe prepare for the worst in all contexts. What do you think, Philip Bond?
Look, I think, Tobias, you sound far more optimistic than many other friends and colleagues I know in the armed services. Really, our defence systems are very platform dependent. You know, for the Olympics, we had a Type 45 destroyer parked in the Thames, and then we put defence missiles on top of buildings. In the scenario we're planning for, which is a conflict with Russia, most of our military platforms will be abroad defending British troops on the front line, one imagines, and on the NATO front line. We don't have in place, in situ, the adequate facilities to defend in the type of situation that we're trying to now plan for, which is mass missile attacks. We simply don't. And we have a range of figures commenting that what we need is an integrated platform with longer-range missile defence to precisely protect us against these attacks. We don't have enough aircraft against Russian glide bomb attacks where the bombers stand off and can launch numerous missiles. So I think that we're fine against kind of small interventions, but I don't think in the war we envisage, the platforms you're naming for defence will be abroad, not at home. And I think what Penny Mordaunt is right in arguing for is a land-based protection system appropriate to our circumstances, just like the Israelis have, but at a longer range.
And that was my point, really, why I asked you that, Tobias, with regard to whether we actually... I know you listed a load of platforms and things, but I was just sceptical as to whether we did actually have that capability to protect ourselves properly, even though we have these other things that are elsewhere. I just kind of would hope that we have something internally that we can control, that we can protect ourselves with, and I don't think we do. But anyway...
Well, I listed the technology that's there already, and there's absolutely right that what's been discussed here is the fact that the threats are changing. The world is getting more dangerous, not less, and we're seeing an alliance between these agitators, these aggressors, namely, particularly Iran and indeed Russia. So absolutely, I stressed that at the very start. We will need to spend more on defence, and it will need to focus on air defence particularly. We have capabilities. We shouldn't dismiss the Type 45, the Sea Viper system. It is the best anti-aircraft, anti-missile, anti-drone system in the world. The world. I make that very, very clear. What we don't have is enough of them because the threat is clearly changing as we speak. We didn't expect to be having state-on-state aggression in the way that we are now about 10 to 15 years ago.
Listen,
that's what we now need to
advance
advance it. And that's why I've called for a defence review to be able to, for us to take stock of what threats are coming over the hill.
I've got to move on, but 10 seconds to you. I'll give 10 seconds.
But the point is, Tobias, I agree with you about the Type 45, but in the war situation which we're now planning for, the Type 45s are not going to be parked up on Britain's shores to defend Britain's shores. They'll be in our shipping lanes.
Well, OK, thank you so much for that. We've run out of time. I could talk about this forever, but we will be carrying on with the Great British debate anyway. So thank you so much to James Schneider, former Labour advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, Philip Blond, former advisor to David Cameron, Tobias Ellwood, Conservative MP for Bournemouth East and former chairman of the Defence Select Committee. Well, if you just joined us, welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue with this Great British debate. I'm asking, is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Danny Kelly and Christine Hamilton. Still to come at 5, my outside guest, famous for being an Olympic world champion. She has also worked closely with the infamous former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and also Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham. Who do you think she is? First, let's get your latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Nana, thank you. It's 4:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Mark Menzies has announced his resignation from the Tory party, saying he won't be standing at the next election. The Fylde MP was suspended following claims he used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who had locked him in a flat. He disputes the allegations. Following an investigation, the Conservative Party says it can't conclude there was a misuse of funds, but said there was a pattern of behaviour that falls below the standards expected of MPs. British Jewish leaders will meet the Metropolitan Police Commissioner later this week after accusing the force of a series of high-profile errors. Sir Mark Rowley is facing calls to quit over his handling of pro-Palestinian protests, with the former Home Secretary also suggesting he's emboldened anti-Semites. The Board of Deputies of British Jews says mistakes have had a devastating effect on the previously high level of trust held in the police. A decision by the US to approve £49 billion in aid for Ukraine has been welcomed by the UK, with the Foreign Secretary describing it as a vital step forward. President Zelensky says the move will keep the war from expanding and will save thousands of lives. It now heads to the Senate, which is expected to pass the bill in the next few days. And a record 50,000 people are running the London Marathon, the majority now crossing the finishing line. Supporters are still out and about, though, cheering those on who are still hoping to complete the 26.2-mile route. They started just after 10 a.m, the event raising millions of pounds for charity. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. Coming up is World View. We'll cross live to Uri Geller and Paul Dudder to get the latest from what's going on there. Next, so we continue with the Great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome? I've got a poll up right now on X asking you that very question. Is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome? Send me your thoughts at gbnews.com/your say. Cast your vote now.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
I wonder, is this the fundamental distinction we need to make between Islam, which is a private religion people may practice freely amongst themselves, and Islamism, when you try and place those values upon other people, place that way of being, force it on people who don't want it?
Tom, I have been very much clear about this thing, that Islam is a religion and people are free to follow that religion in the UK, in a free Western society. So we have no problem with people following their religion as long as it is not being imposed onto the wider society. And when you talk about drawing a distinction between Islam and Islamism, people like me, you and me, we are drawing that distinction. We're trying to maintain that distinction. But if you look at the commentator from the Muslim community, some commentator, they would like to blur this line and they would ask you, what is Islamism? Where does it exist? Sorry, it does exist. We see it. And the teacher, this incident is an epitome of that kind of, ideology being prevalent, in our society.
Khadija, do you worry that these views are typical for some sections of society? Do you think that there's a problem with some Muslim men, that they have perhaps views that we don't consider to be British values?
There are certain readings of religion which are misogynistic, which are discriminatory, which are homophobic. We need to be honest about it. We need to be calling it out whenever we hear these kind of views. It's been a long time that we are letting these kind of ideologies crawling in, spreading tentacles in British society, and we are just ignoring it in the name of respecting people's culture and religion. You are not suppressed in the UK.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. If you just tuned in, get out of my shot, Christine. Yeah. It's 37 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online, and on digital radio. You heard them there, the dastardly duo, as we continue with the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome? Senior officials have urged the Prime Minister to consider creating a missile defence system similar to that of Israel's, because last weekend, which was harrowing for those who live in Israel, 300 drones and ballistic missiles were flown into Israel from Iran, and all but a few were intercepted by their country's dome system, alongside the other backing from their partners as well, like us, the British. Concerns were raised that if something like this happened in the UK, that we'd have no sort of security, nothing close to that at all, and our friends and foes are ramping up their defence spending as well, whilst our government has whittled spending on our armed forces down to 2% of GDP. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome? OK, joining me in my panel, also broadcaster Christine Hamilton and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. I'm going to start with you, Danny Kelly.
I didn't catch all of your panel discussion. Did someone mention something called Dragonfire, which the Royal Navy, hopefully by 2027, are going to equip all of their ships? They're going to try and get it in Ukraine first. Cost £10 a shot. Basically, it's a laser beam. It's quite remarkable, this technology. Now, last week, I was rather casually dismissive of your suggestion that maybe we need an Iron Dome. And my defence of that would be that, well, hopefully we're going to get some warning that we're going to be under attack. But the more you think about this, as this conflict sort of accelerates and is showing no sign of stopping or slowing down, you wouldn't necessarily have the luxury of saying, OK, well, we think maybe we're going to get attacked in 3 weeks. You need to plan now. You need to start planning right now, today. Now, in the first Gulf War, you saw the very early equivalents, and they were called the Patriot missile. Saddam Hussein in 1991, I think that was the first Gulf War, he tried to draw Israel into the conflict by firing Scud missiles into Israel.
I remember that.
Yeah, so Israel would fight back, and then all of a sudden the Arab world would get involved, and it would be, a Middle Eastern war rather than just in Iraq and Iraq and Kuwait war with the coalition. So this Dragon Fire costs a tenner, so that's going to be cost effective. But I agree, listen, I'm going to defer to the experts. And if the experts say, listen, let's start getting our house in order defence-wise, let's get some Iron Domes, let's get some more Patriots, if that's still modern technology.
But I do sometimes feel a sense of almost complacency sometimes. I mean, just speaking to them earlier, that, oh, well, we've got this and we're fine, and we're not fine. And I'm really glad that Philip Blond was able to point out that, look, we're not fine. All our sort of defence things outside our defence in this country are reliant on platforms elsewhere, and that's dangerous.
Absolutely, and we don't only just need an Iron Dome, we need an Iron Lady. And when the Iron Lady, at the end of the Cold War, Margaret Thatcher, she warned that, OK, the Cold War was ended, but we cannot take our defence for granted, and I think that's what we do to a certain extent. We think, well, we're never going to have an invasion or anything like that. And I think we also depend to a certain extent on, if something comes from the Middle East or Russia, there'll be somebody between us and them who will intercept it. Not necessarily. The Russians, submarines in the North Sea, you could easily find a cruise missile is lobbed from one of them. So definitely we do. And people sort of say, oh, you mustn't spend on defence, we need more hospitals and goodness knows what. If we don't defend ourselves in an increasingly dangerous world, it doesn't matter how many hospitals you have, we'll be wiped out. So, of course we do, yes. All in favour.
Well, listen, this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices there. Opportunity to be on and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we go? Where should we go? Should we go to...
the home of carpet.
Kidderminster. Let's have a chat with John Reid in Kidderminster. John Reid. I think we need to do a little song, don't we? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy 80th birthday, John.
He's not 80. How dare you? John, how old are you? It's your birthday today, John. How old are you today? 25.
Absolute honour, Nana. I'm 76 today.
Really?
So I was born the same year that the National Health Service started, 1948.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you ever so much. That's really nice of you. Thank you so much.
That's a pleasure.
Sorry it wasn't in tune.
Yeah, it wasn't in tune, though. Sorry about that. But so what do you think, then, John? I mean, do we need to start investing in something like an Iron Dome, have more protection on soil in this country, like Israel?
Yeah, I agree with both of your panellists, really. The defence of this country is obviously of the utmost importance, and of course it is. Whether we can actually produce a dome like the Israelis have and stop ourselves being bombed out of the world by missiles or anything else, I doubt that somehow. I don't think we're the world power that we once were. Perhaps we were never really, having been born 3 years after the World War II finished. I've no knowledge of real war. But I think we should be looking at our defence. But to be honest, Nana, I think the big danger is terrorism. It's very much easier for a terrorist to do something horrible in this country and, do some serious harm and serious damage than there ever is in missiles coming over. So I think, yes, we do need to scale it up. And as for Penny Mordaunt, well, I think she's just posturing. I think she wants to be the Prime Minister, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She might make a better job of it.
I think anyone would. John Reid, thank you so much. Really good to talk to you. Happy birthday, John. Right.
Thank you, Nana.
That's fabulous, John Reid. It's his birthday today. Bless his heart. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, our next Great British Debate, I'm asking, has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people on the weekends? But next, Worldview, I'll be speaking to Paul Dudridge and Uri Geller. Don't go anywhere. That's on the way.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after another sunny day for most of us, there is a further cloud and rain on the way, all thanks to an area of low pressure well up to the north of the UK, but bringing these weak frontal systems that will sink their way southwards through the rest of the day. We do still have high pressure around, but that slowly slips away towards the northwest. So the cloudiest skies through the rest of today, definitely for eastern parts of Scotland, northern England, and slowly sinking their way southwards across much of the UK through the early hours of Monday morning. Western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland generally staying that little bit drier, but it's southern and eastern parts of England that will see those clear skies and some chilly temperatures with some frost in places, but not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain. That does mean that Monday starts a much cloudier day for most of us, particularly compared to the weekend, with the outbreaks of rain that we see through the morning slowly slipping their way southwards as we go through the rest of the day. Not turning particularly heavy, but definitely cloudier and a much damper day than we saw over the weekend. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon. I'm feeling quite warm across much of Scotland, highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely chillier under all that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Monday and into the start of Tuesday, that weak frontal system eventually clears its way towards the southeast, leaving a bright start for many of us with plenty of sunshine through Tuesday morning. Southern and eastern parts still staying quite cloudy with outbreaks of rain, and there'll be further showers through Tuesday and Wednesday as well, and further hints of something more unsettled through the second half of the week.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 47 minutes after 4 o'clock and it's time for World View. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome if you just tuned in. Now, last week, Israel's military forces intercepted 99% of the over 300 drones and missiles that were launched by Iran near the Syrian-Iraq border. And just one day ago, the United States granted Israel $17 billion in military aid. This package also includes $9 billion of support of those in Gaza, sorry, not Ghana. That's where my parents are from. Joining me to talk about all of that in Israel is performer and mystifier Uri Geller. Uri, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you again, Nana, for having me once again on your show. No, look, Nana, I'm here in my museum in Tel Aviv, and I don't know if you knew this, but I was friends with John Lennon. That was when I used to live in New York. Here behind me, I have some mementos of John, including, believe it or not, a pair of his glasses, which he did not like because they were not round. And by the way, I also have some of his hair, which means I have John Lennon's DNA. Now, John was a dreamer, and his most famous song was Imagine. We all know Imagine. This is an anthem about peace in the world. Now, we are in a very dangerous place now. The Middle East is in a state of conflict. But I was very encouraged to learn that America, as you said, has just voted to send $17 billion of defense aid to Israel. Wow, the relationship with America is still ironclad. Now, Iran will hate the fact that America is spending $17 billion on Israel's defense. But not only Iran, Nana, the protesters flooding the streets of London every weekend will also hate it. But before the usual critics start shouting about it, and there will be people in Britain, and no doubt, who will wonder why America is spending so much money on Israel. Well, let me tell you and your viewers some truth. Look, Israel, yes, Israel is on the front line of the Western world. We hold the same values as Europe and America. Israel believes in freedom and human rights. Israel is like a dam holding back the tide of Islamic extremists from flooding into Europe and the UK, Nana. Now, let me tell you what America gets in return, because people don't know. For $17 billion, let me tell you, it gets a partnership with the most technically advanced country in the Middle East. It gets intelligence, which saves American lives and British lives, if you didn't know that. It gets to do billions of dollars of trade, which creates Americans' jobs. And most importantly, it gets a stable and reliable partner in a region filled with chaos. But do you know what else? And this is what no one ever talks about. No American soldier fights for Israel. Americans do not lose lives for Israel. Israel always fights its own wars, and there are no American boots on the ground in Israel. Now, let me tell you this. In Japan, there are 50,000 American troops. In Germany, there are 40,000 American troops. In South Korea, there are 30,000 American troops. In Korea. The cost of U.S. aid to these countries actually dwarfs what it gives to Israel. And by the way, Nana, by the way, the new U.S. aid package, $9 billion, is going to humanitarian aid to Gaza. So the Palestinians, and the Palestinians benefit in a huge way. Do I have
very briefly?
Minute?
You know, you've got about 20. You've got about 20 seconds.
Okay, look. The last thing, we talked about the missile, and I showed you this picture.
Yes,
I want
we saw that yesterday.
Wait. I'm coming close up. Look at the size of this.
That goes all the way back, doesn't it? Yes, we saw that yesterday. Uri Geller, it is frightening.
Missiles were launched into Israel. There you go.
Uri Geller, of course, always a pleasure to hear your thoughts and your views. Thank you so much for joining me again. And you take care of yourself. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much. That's Uri Geller. Right, let's cross over live to America now to speak to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge, all the P's. Paul Dudridge, right, well, we've got loads of things going. Because we've got the Trump trial. Give us a quick update.
There are 34 felony charges levelled against President Trump, and he's facing them in New York. This week has been the first week of the trial, and that has just been the jury selection stage. So we still haven't seen any evidence exchanged. That'll start this week. We'll start actually seeing what case President Trump has to answer. The trial is scheduled to last between 6 and 8 weeks, and obviously that's going to take a massive bite out of his ability to campaign effectively, because in previous cases he's been involved in, they've been civil trials, so he hasn't had to actually attend. In a criminal trial, he is actually bound to attend every day.
Well, they tried to say that he fell asleep and things like that, but to be honest, who wouldn't? I'd be so bored. I'd probably fall asleep as well. What's going on then with regard to Biden's uncle, eaten by cannibals? That's what... It's not true, is it?
I'm coming round on... I think I may end up voting Biden, I have to say, because I realise what he's for now. He's at a war memorial in Scranton, Pennsylvania this week, and there's no doubt at all his uncle Ambrose Finnegan was a war hero. He was shot down off, I think it's off New Guinea. Today, or this week, Biden has said his uncle was eaten by cannibals. His uncle was eaten by cannibals. The Pentagon have said no evidence of such at all. The White House have come out and gone, yeah, even the White House now are just going like, nah, that never happened. It's never even close. But the leader of the free world, the most powerful man in the world, has now started just story hour every day. It's fantastic. So like I said, I think I'm all in on Biden all of a sudden. It's like he can't just simply have a war hero in the family. The man was eaten by cannibals. Ambrose Finnegan, look it up. It's fantastic.
I don't know how anyone in America can take him seriously and talk about him as though he's a serious politician. He's not. He's ill and he needs some help or treatment, but he certainly should not be running the free world. And very briefly, you've got about 20 seconds on this. Are the Democrats aiming to remove Trump's Secret Service if he's convicted?
Yes, Democrat Benny Thompson, he was the chair of the January 6th committee. This is any public official at all found guilty of a crime should have their Secret Service removed. And so that would only impact Donald Trump, and that's just a coincidence, I'm sure.
Yes, of course. Well, listen, it's such a stitch-up. That's what it looks like to me. Paul Dudridge, host of the Politics People podcast, thank you so much for all of that. It's great to talk to you. And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views about the Iron Dome. Nigel says all countries should have an Iron Dome, but in the UK it would never get finished. due to costs and delays just like HS2. Patrick says, Iron Dome, it's not the external threat that we need to defend ourselves from, it's the homegrown terror on our streets. And Wally says, we live on an island and yet cannot protect our borders, so what hope have we if the government to defend our skies? Literally. Well, still to come, my outside guest. She has won the BMX World Championships 3 times and represented Team GB at the 2008 Beijing and London 2012 Olympic Games. Who do you think she is? She's my outside guest. She is on the way. First, let's get some weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after another sunny day for most of us, there is a further cloud and rain on the way, all thanks to an area of low pressure well up to the north of the UK, but bringing these weak frontal systems that will sink their way southwards through the rest of the day. We do still have high pressure around, but that slowly slips away towards the northwest. So the cloudiest skies through the rest of today, definitely for eastern parts of Scotland, northern England, and slowly sinking their way southwards across much of the UK through the early hours of Monday morning. Western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland generally staying that little bit drier, but it's southern and eastern parts of England that will see those clear skies and some chilly temperatures with some frost in places, but not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain. That does mean that Monday starts a much cloudier day for most of us, particularly compared to the weekend, with the outbreaks of rain that we see through the morning slowly slipping their way southwards as we go through the rest of the day. Not turning particularly heavy, but definitely cloudier and a much damper day than we saw over the weekend. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon and feeling quite warm across much of Scotland, highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely chillier under all that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Monday and into the start of Tuesday, that weak frontal system eventually clears its way towards the southeast, leaving a bright start for many of us with plenty of sunshine through Tuesday morning. Southern and eastern parts still staying quite cloudy with outbreaks of rain, and there'll be further showers through Tuesday and Wednesday as well, and further hints of something more unsettled through the second half of the week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Coming up, the Great British Debate is on the way. I'm asking, has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people on the weekends? But next, my
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise
and who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our family.
Hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Coming up, my outside guest, well, she's a former track cyclist and BMX racer who competed for Great Britain in the Olympic Games. We'll talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. But who is she? Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people on the weekends? Thousands descend on the capital almost every single weekend, but it means that a lot of Jewish people are afraid to leave their houses. What do you think? Has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people? But first, let's get your latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Nana, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour, Mark Menzies has announced his resignation from the Tory party, saying he won't be standing at the next election. The Fylde MP was suspended following claims he used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who had locked him in a flat. He disputes the allegations. Following an investigation, the Conservative Party says it can't conclude there was a misuse of funds, but said there was a pattern of behaviour that falls below the standards expected of MPs. British Jewish leaders will meet the Metropolitan Police Commissioner later this week after accusing the force of a series of high-profile errors. Sir Mark Rowley is facing calls to quit over his handling of pro-Palestinian protests, with the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, suggesting he's emboldened anti-Semites. The Board of Deputies of British Jews says mistakes have a devastating effect on the previously high level of trust held in the police. The campaign against anti-Semitism is also calling for Sir Mark to resign or be sacked after its chief executive was described as openly Jewish by an officer. Cabinet Minister Claire Coutinho says the government is addressing the incident.
The Home Secretary has made clear that what happened was unacceptable. I understand there's going to be a meeting in the coming days. I don't know what conversation is going to take place there. I think we should see how that conversation goes. But ultimately, what's really important is that people in the Jewish community feel safe. They know that we're on their side and that what we want to see is equal policing in this country and also to make sure that they can go about their normal lives. That's what I want to see.
A decision by the US to approve £49 billion in aid for Ukraine has been welcomed by the UK, with the Foreign Secretary describing it as a vital step forward. After months of wrangling, American politicians ended a deadlock, agreeing to provide a package which will also help replenish weapons and munitions. President Zelensky says the move will keep the war from expanding and will save thousands of lives. It now heads to the Senate, which is expected to pass the bill in the next few days. 20 million people were plagued by antisocial behaviour and vandalism last year, according to new figures. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Coopers says Labour government would crack down on yobs. She promised the party would get tough to restore community safety. Former police officer Oliver Lawrence says more policy isn't the answer.
More legislation, more policy, more procedure isn't going to fix it. I would argue that we've got more than enough with more than 32 pieces of legislation already out there. What we need is proper enforcement and proper execution of the legislation by our justice system to make sure that we have penalties for people that commit these crimes in our communities.
In other news, thousands of people have been gathering for a vigil on Bondi Beach to remember those who died in a stabbing attack in Sydney. Six people were killed by Joel Cauchi in a shopping centre last Saturday. The attacker was shot dead by police.
Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says, "May those we have lost rest in eternal peace forever in our hearts." And a record 50,000 people are running the London Marathon. Many have now crossed the finishing line after completing the 26.2-mile route. Supporters are still out and about, though, cheering those on who are still making their way through the city streets. They started just after 10 a.m, the event raising millions of pounds for charities. Professional athletes kicked off the event, with Kenyan Alexander Manyeo winning the race in 2 hours and 4 minutes. In the women's category, Olympic champion Perez Jepchirchir set a new world record. Also Kenyan, she finished in 2 hours, 16 minutes and 16 seconds. She says she was surprised by her achievement.
Feeling grateful. I'm so happy, unbelievable. I was not expecting that. It means a lot for me because last year I was expecting to win, but unfortunately I didn't win. I was sad, but I was happy too. But this year I'm so happy.
For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? Oh, sorry, this is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Now, still to come, each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on The Outside. Today, my outside guest is a British former bicycle motocross racer and track cyclist whose prime competitive years began in 2002. She won the BMX World Championships 3 times and represented Team GB at the 2008 Beijing and London 2012 Olympic Games. My guest will be revealed in just a moment, not unless you've already guessed who she is. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people on the weekends? With the government's counter-extremism commissioner warning last month that London is a no-go zone for Jews every weekend, what do you think? Are you Jewish, perhaps? You think that? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people on weekends? And, of course, there's a new way for you to get in touch with me as ever, gbnews.com/your say. So each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on The Outside. And today, my outside guest is a British former bicycle motocross racer, a track cyclist whose prime competitive years began in 2002. She won the BMX World Championships 3 times and in a 2-time Team Spirit sprint sort of world champion on the track and represented Team GB in 2008 and 2012 in the Olympic Games. Did you work out who she is? Oh, well, I'll tell you. I'm joined by former Olympic athlete Shanaz. It's not that, it's Shaznay. Is it Shanaz Reid? It's Shaznay. Have they written it wrong?
Sinead Reid.
Oh, Sinead. I asked you how do I say it, and I said it exactly right.
You first said
and then I totally got it wrong. I knew that would happen.
That's okay.
Sinead Reid. This is who she is. Sinead. So BMXing, you would normally think that most people who do BMXing are mostly male. And it's quite a daredevil sport. Why on earth did you choose to do that?
Because I literally was a kid that was full of energy, like I couldn't sit still, and now I've been diagnosed with ADHD, so it makes a lot of sense. And I just loved anything that made me feel alive. So, like BMX, jumping 35-foot jumps, racing around the track, like, just summed me up to a T.
But so you've been diagnosed with ADHD? So many people say that. I mean, I probably got it, but I mean, because there's so many people being diagnosed with it, could that not just be the normal you that is you? I mean, I'm hyper, I'm up there. I wouldn't say that's something wrong. ADHD sounds like an illness.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel, actually.
You feel ill, or you feel that it's not
I feel
illness?
like it can be a tag. Like, I just feel like I'm not a tin of beans, so I don't need a label on me. But it made me allow and understand a little bit how my brain worked. But for me, it's a superpower. Like, to have this much energy, to be able to hyper-focus, to be able to be committed to something, like, yeah, I mean, I'm blessed.
Why do they have to give that some sort of label as though it's a bad thing? I think I've got it. Yeah, bring it on. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some serious cases where, it's a negative thing, but I think most people I hear are quite hyperactive, and I think there's probably a level of normality to this. Now, so you started BMXing, you went into this. Did you ever imagine that you'd then become a world champion at it and be an Olympian doing that?
Yeah, I did.
You did?
I did. You know, I was a kid, like, my mum had me at 16. I was from the council estate in Crewe, and I had this vision. I'd look out the window and I'd be like, I can do and be anything I want to be. I wanted to be a bit more of a success than my father was. He was a Jamaican, 19 kids, had nothing to do with any of his
19 kids, wow.
He definitely didn't fire blanks. And I wanted to be successful, so I just needed to find that niche, something to grab hold of. But I always, like, I'd practiced my signature when I was a kid, like, in school. Yeah, and I just had this just immense sort of drive to be successful.
Well, and you have been successful. So talk to me about all the stuff you said, BMXing. What is... Because I did a little thing a little while ago about BMXing, many years ago, one of the first things I did in TV. And I asked the person, because he was doing these, like, somersault type things with the bike. Yeah. Do you do all that?
No, I'm all about speed. So
you're
it's
speed
effectively
racer.
8 of us on a 10-metre high starting ramp. The gate drops. We go around a series of jumps and round turns, and it's essentially the fastest person wins. So we're about speed and efficiency over jumps, really, whereas the tricks and stuff is more the freestyle BMX racing.
Yeah, that looks kind of scary.
They're the real crazy
They're the ones who've definitely got ADHD and some sort of level of madness as well attached to them as well. So you started doing all that. You became successful. What was it like being in the Olympics? I mean, 2012 was such a great Olympics. I remember that.
Yeah, like, it was a dream come true, because going to Beijing, BMX had never been in the Olympic Games, so it was his first time it was going in. I was tipped to be the favourite to win the Olympics. Was going in world champion, hadn't lost a lap. And I remember, like, it felt so different to a traditional BMX World Championships. Princess Margaret had knocked on my door to wish me good luck.
Wow.
David Beckham was there.
No.
And I'm just this kid with my BMX.
Did he come and talk to you?
Yeah, like,
he
came to London as well with his boys, and, like, there were so many BMX fans when it was big in the 80s, and, like, I felt like a bit of a deer in the headlights, to be honest, a rabbit in the headlights, to be honest. But, like, just that how proud I felt to represent my country, and so many people had put me down over the years, saying you'll never make it, you'll amount to nothing, and to be stood there with the jersey on in Beijing, it was a bit of a stick my fingers up to those who said I'd never make it.
No, exactly. And what does the flag mean to you, like the British flag? Because lots of different companies like Nike have taken it on board and sort of turned it purple and done sort of weird things to it. Yeah. What's your take on all of that?
I'm a very traditional... like, the British flag to me, like, is everything. Like, I love the like, when I was on the podium and just listened to the national anthem playing, like, if something's not broken, why try and fix it? Like, it is what it is. And to me, them colours represent, our country, Great Britain, and I think it just needs to be left how it is and not, I think, yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah, I don't see why they need to tamper with it. So when how long, your career BMXing, obviously, as you get older, it then sort of disappears. You're no longer doing that, right?
Yeah, no longer doing it.
So then, from there, what did you go and do?
So from there, a bit of a wild story, really. I retired and then become an alcoholic.
No.
So, yeah.
Really?
Not out of choice. I didn't think, what I'm going to do when I retired.
No, become an alcoholic. I want to drink all that.
Yeah, but I did. I went down a very dark path. I lost identity, because from a 10-year-old kid all the way up to 27, all I knew was the bike, like, nothing else. Like, I didn't have any GCSEs. I didn't do anything but ride that bike to the fastest capabilities I was capable of. And for a few years, it went very dark, and I had to get help and go to a support group. I went to AA, and it saved my life. Like, and I say being an alcoholic is actually the best thing to ever happen to me, and I don't say that lightly either. Just because of finding out who I was from the inside. Like, it's very easy to operate in this world in a superficial way. But for me, I've always been, like, very, like, integral and deep, and I wanted to know who this person was in this shell that I was in, not what I did, but who I was. And it was a very painful, dark journey, but such a journey that it's been, yeah, I never thought I'd live the life that I live today.
So how did you get out of it? You went to saw somebody, got help, but then how did you manage to get yourself back on a great level pegging? You're doing commentary, you're doing all sorts of things now.
Do you know, like, I just think if you do the next right thing, the next right thing happens. And I never had, like, I remember I'd been like, I'd had no work for 3 years, nothing. I then got sober, and then there's a spiritual aspect to the AA programme. And for me, I connected with a higher power greater than myself. And my life, I can't even explain it. Like, even when I think about it now, like, I'm so grateful. But it just got better and better. And I had this sort of epiphany and a dream that I wanted to be on SAS, Celeb SAS. And everyone was laughing at me. I was 18.5 stone, drinking alcohol. And everyone was like, how are you going to make that programme? And then one day, 6 months after being sober, I was in the US, I was on holiday, and I get an email from a random man. And, yeah, lo and behold, it was to be asked to go onto SAS. And it was just like, how has that happened? So you ask me how, I don't know. I just keep doing the right next thing, and the right next thing happens.
Well, you have to put yourself out there to get that thing. If you're not, if you don't make the applications or take the time out to receive this next good thing, then it won't happen. And you've been doing that. And how was that for you? How well did you do in there?
I did well. Like, it was just so interesting because we did it in Scotland. Did it with the last series with Ant Middleton, which was fantastic. But it was, it was. I thought sport was hard. Like, I really did. And I thought, oh, what you see on the TV, it's never going to be as hard in real life. It's harder. It's harder. It's 24 hours in the day, and they fill them 24 hours. It was brutal. But in doing so, again, they break you down to build you back up. And you just find out more and more about yourself. And that's what we're here for, isn't it? Like, ultimately, is to find out who we are and, you know, and what we're capable of on a deeper level. But any opportunity, honestly, like, I grab with both hands. Like, I always want to be better and do better in life, but in line with my morals and values. So I'm game to take it all like I did in sport.
What about Nicola Sturgeon? What was the involvement there?
Yeah, so I do many different things. Someone asked me what my job is. I'm like, I've got a few things that I do. But I worked as the youth ambassador for Scotland, and a lot of that work was with Nicola Sturgeon for the youth and deprived. Because for me, it's all about grassroots. If there wasn't volunteers, my career never would have took off, ever. Because no family came to watch me race, very supportive grandparents, but I needed to have them volunteers. So for me, it's about putting back in to the sport. And in doing so, it was, I went to some interesting places in Scotland. It was great to work with, like, different MPs and, you know, rub shoulders with different walks of life. But just to give my honest review in a situation where it's people full of suits, you know, MPs, it was just like, I'll always give you my honest opinion if you like it or you don't like it. And yeah, I learned a lot. And we was able to put in quite a lot of infrastructures for the kids and stuff. So, yeah, it was a really, really privileged job.
How long ago was that?
It was only last year, so I did the placement for 3 years.
So that was only last year.
Yeah.
She's not there anymore, is she?
No, she left.
Let's not talk about Nicola Sturgeon. My mother doesn't like her at all. My mother says, I hate that woman. Bless her heart. So now what are you doing? Now where's your thing? Because, like you said, you do lots of different things, but now what are you focused on?
So last year, I decided to put a little pause on my life, just a reassessment. I was living in London, I was in a relationship, and I sort of got lost a little bit again. So I came back home to live in the north, and now I've joined a new agency, which is amazing, and they really are in line with who I am and what I want to achieve. And then I'm in a new relationship, which is, I feel like a bit of a soppy person, but it's someone who I'm going to marry and spend the rest of my life with. So I couldn't be any happier internally. And then what am I doing with my career? It's the same again. I've got goals I'd like to achieve this year, but I'd love, like, doing presenting, just more of the same of what I'm doing, but to a greater degree. So if that's, you know, doing more TV shows, or that's working in a government perspective, I just want to do more of what I'm doing, but in a better way. But the biggest thing is I wrote a book last year. So when I hit pause last year, I've got dyslexia, I never went to school, and I really wanted to challenge myself in a mental and an emotional way instead of physical. I was all about the physical. Sinead's, you know, and I wanted to kind of kibosh that and to do something that was so off track. So I wrote a self-help book, memoir, and that, I think, is probably my proudest thing I've ever done, just to dedicate 12 hours a day. And I wrote the whole book in 7 weeks, so, like, with the superpower ADHD,
exactly.
Hyper-focus.
Don't take the label.
Yeah, don't take the label.
Don't take the label. Because there's so many people now diagnosed with it, it sort of feels a bit, you know, I don't mean to be...
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I use it to my strengths and not my weaknesses. And for me, I wrote the book and I want to just build on that, and I want to do a lot more mentoring as well. That's something that, to me, is helping someone directly achieve their goals, not in a sense where I want to be their therapist and, you know, but it's like, if you've got something you want to achieve, let me jump on board and we achieve it together. So there's all sorts going on.
That's very exciting. Do you have, like, is there a website or somewhere you go? Can people follow you on social media?
My social media is @SineadReid, and that's sort of across the board. I'm just my full name.
Just search for Sinead,
just hit that follow, and I just do different content. Like, for me, it's about being open, a lot of mental health stuff in there, fitness stuff. You get it all with me.
Well, listen, Sinead, thank you very much for joining me. That is Sinead Reid. Thank you so much.
Right.
Good luck. Yeah, I think she's fabulous, isn't she? What a motivational character that is, you see. So you can literally have anything if you focus on it. So thank you so much for Sinead. For Sinead. I was doing so well. Why do I keep saying it how many times? From Sinead Reid for coming in and talking to us. Right, coming up, Supplement Sunday, my panel and I discuss some of the news stories that caught our eyes. Next, the Great British Debate. I'm asking, has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people on the weekend?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TfL bosses have come under fire after banning an advert... Oh, God. They've banned an advert for a comedy show because it had a hot dog on it, because that supposedly promotes obesity.
The comedian Ed Gamble has swapped the image of the fast food favourite in favour of a cucumber instead. And there's the cucumber on the plate.
So is the UK turning into a nanny state? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, and nutritionist Olivia Parry. Good to see you both this morning. Olivia, it's a comedy show. He's not promoting eating hot dogs, is he? Is this just a load of nonsense?
The thing is, we have a huge problem with overweight and obesity in this country. We're fourth in Europe. It's big business. Advertising for food companies is big business. They make so much money. You just have to switch on primetime TV to watch, food after food advertisements. And it's for the youngsters as well, who don't have the nutritional education. We're not taught cookery in school anymore. People go to college and to university, they don't know how to cook.
But
and it leads
forgive me for jumping in, Olivia. Forgive me for jumping in, but the whole point with this is it's an advert for a comedy show.
Yes, I know, but this is a wider issue.
I think it's a load of old tosh, to be quite honest with you. It's a hot dog. In fact, I wish they'd have put onions on the hot dog. A bit of what you fancy won't hurt you. You should eat 80-20 anyway. We talk about a nanny state. I actually think, arguably, we're becoming an authoritarian state. Opinions banned. Comedy banned. The England flag banned. It's like we've got to wear a virtual muzzle.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The People's
Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Sinead, I've got... Oh, hello. Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, welcome. This is GB News on TV, online, and digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's just gone 24 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Right, so it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people on the weekends? Now, ever since the October 7th Hamas attacks, we've seen thousands descend on London every weekend, protesting about the war in Gaza, and the conflict has led to a rise in anti-Semitism across London and the UK, with many British Jews afraid to enter the capital during these marches as a result. And last month, the government's Counter-Extremism Commissioner warned that London is a no-go zone for Jews every weekend, although march organisers have said that Jewish people did not need to be scared of events. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, has London actually become a no-go zone for Jewish people on weekends? Well, I can also now get the view of UK. Joining me to discuss is UKIP Neil Hamilton, also activist Peter Tatchell, former London police officer Norman Brennan, and also police commentator Peter Spence. Right, I'm going to start with you. Norman Brennan, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, anybody coming to London, whether by transport, train, bus, bike, on foot, and on the train or en route or when you're at that location, you see threats, you see placards which are visible representations, and you hear chants that are very abusive and threatening. You're going to think twice about going to London. In fact, you probably won't go. And if ever you go to an area, for example, where there's high knife crime, violent crime, and as a result of that, you then refuse to go there or do not wish to go there because you fear for your safety, that of your family and children, that theoretically becomes a no-go area. Now, I was in policing for 31 years, and I've got to tell you, when I joined the police service, there was no street, borough, city in Britain that was a no-go area. But I'm sure for the Jewish community now, many of them fear coming to London. And if you fear going to a location that you would wish to legally go to, that has to be a no-go area for that period of time and for that location.
Well, it does seem that way. Peter Tatchell.
I'm a very strong supporter of the campaign against anti-Semitism, but I'm extremely distressed and upset by these false allegations. Over the last 6 months, there have been more than a dozen huge marches with a total of more than 3 to 4 million people. Of all these marches, only 36 people have been charged with any offence. That's far less than last year. Now, I think that's the issue. These marches are not Jewish people. Many Jewish people participate, and they're welcomed. The marches are against Israel's war crimes in Gaza, and many of us also condemn the war crimes by Hamas against Israel. So it's completely false to say that these marches are threatening to Jewish people. They're not.
Well, I don't think I don't think that's true at all, actually, Peter. And just because there's only been 36 arrests doesn't make it that Jewish people feel they can't go to London. And I've heard many Jewish people telling me that London is a frightening place for them on the weekends, and a lot of them actually leave on the weekend to make sure they don't have to deal with any of it. That's just.
I'm sure some do say that, but many do not. Many Jewish people, thousands, are joining those marches. They're Jewish people who disagree with the Israeli government's policy. They're not anti-Semitic. They're not colluding with anti-Semitism. They are Jewish people. And everybody on that march I've ever met spoken against anti-Semitism.
Why then? And you say that, but one of them, somebody was, carrying a swastika. I'm not saying that everybody in those marches are bad. I'm just saying that many Jewish people are fearful of going into central London because of them. Neil Hamilton.
Well, the reality is that if people do feel that they're not safe in central London as a result of these highly intimidating marches, then that's the reality. It's not just perception. That's what they feel. They don't imagine this. They see people wandering around with placards saying Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. What does that mean? It's the annihilation of the state of Israel. It's a call for genocide, effectively, to which Hamas is explicitly committed. So, that's the reality of these marches. And it's not just Jewish people who wonder, why is it that we allow the centre of our capital city to be taken over every single week by these people who are demonstrating about something that's going on in another country? And yes, there's a controversy, obviously, of worldwide significance. But there has to be a limit to the capacity for fanatics on either side of this argument to take over our streets in central London. And the result of this is that people do definitely feel in very large numbers that they are not welcome in their own capital city, and that if you're Jewish, then you might well feel that you are physically at risk of being harmed.
Peter Spencer.
I mean, what has catalysed this debate, it seems to me, is that policeman a couple of days ago referring to the Jewish guy with the skull cap as being openly Jewish. And that has really got people going because of the fact that it is an echo of the language used about the gay community, whereas it used to be the love that dare not speak its name, and then after that, eventually it became legal, but the stigma remained, and so people, the braver members of the male gay community, would refer to themselves as openly gay, and God alone knows there's been so much anti-Semitism over history. Just check out Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice and look no further. But when it comes to what is going on, there is a hideous war taking place with tens of thousands of people losing their lives. We live in a democracy. We don't live in Russia. So if people feel strongly about it, they are allowed to go on the streets. And when it comes to specifically the Jewish community, I would make the point that a mate of mine made the mistake of trying to drive from Camden to Southwark a couple of weekends ago, and it took him over 2 hours. So no mind a no-go zone for Jewish people. It's a no-go zone for drivers. They're jolly inconvenient, but what can you do?
Well,
in a civilized society, civilized society, there cannot and must not ever be any place in Britain where there's a no-go area. What I would do, I mean, I've been in policing and law and order for 45 years. I'm ashamed at what my country has become. I don't recognise it anymore. And there's 5 words that in history will sum up this era: anger, hatred, belligerence, division and revenge. And these demonstrations, week in and week out, that sack police officers from all over the local counties and London and devoid the local communities of their police officers, are under the cosh day in and day out. Yes, some will make mistakes, some will say the wrong things. The Commissioner shouldn't resign. The London Mayor should resign. And by golly, those 5 words I've just described Britain and London as being will define this era in history, and it's shameful.
Norman Brennan, thank you very much. Former police officer Neil Hamilton, leader of UKIP. Also Peter Tatchell, human rights activist, and Peter Spencer, political commentator. Thank you so much for your thoughts. This is GB News, 32 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people on the weekends? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Christina and Danny. But first, let's get your latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Nana. It's 5:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. Mark Menzies has announced his resignation from the Tory party, saying he won't be standing at the next election. The Fylde MP was suspended following claims he used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who had locked him in a flat. He disputes the allegations. Following an investigation, the Conservative Party says it can't conclude there was a misuse of funds, but said there was a pattern of behaviour that falls below the standards expected of MPs. British Jewish leaders will meet the Metropolitan Police Commissioner later this week after accusing the force of a series of high-profile errors. Sir Mark Rowley is facing calls to quit over his handling of pro-Palestinian protests, with the former Home Secretary also suggesting he's emboldened anti-Semites. The Board of Deputies of British Jews says mistakes have had a devastating effect on the previously high level of trust held in the police. A decision by the US to approve £49 billion in aid for Ukraine has been welcomed by the UK, with the Foreign Secretary describing it as a vital step forward. President Zelensky says the move will keep the war from expanding and will save thousands of lives. It now heads to the Senate, which is expected to pass the bill in the next few days. And a record 50,000 people are running the London Marathon, the majority now crossing the finishing line. Supporters are still out and about, though, cheering those on who are still hoping to complete the 26.2-mile route. They started just after 10 a.m, the event raising millions of pounds for charities. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. Coming up, my mini debate. Is it fair to tell people to lose weight? The Welsh Health Minister thinks so. Next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people on weekends?
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
You think this country needs new gas power stations? Apparently, this will all be about trying to get some form of energy security. Rishi Sunak has upset people today with this suggestion, people saying that actually this would do more damage to climate change than it would do good. Where are you on it, Richard?
I'll tell you exactly where. We need a lot more gas power stations and nuclear power stations because quite often the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Last week, we imported 16% of all our electricity because we haven't got enough capacity in the UK, and we're now totally over-reliant on renewables.
The part of the problem is the lack of storage capacity, which the government has finally got round to addressing. I think this as backup is actually quite a sensible idea. But they are not doing anything, as far as I can tell. At the moment, it will be retrofitted to have storage capability, which seems to be utterly bonkers. I mean, anyone who's got solar panels, you know very well you're storing up energy. So it's about storage as much as production. They could have gone, 20 years ago, we could have had nuclear power. We could have done more. We haven't looked far enough ahead in the future, and we are in grave danger of making the same mistake. I mean, the other side of this is, what is the difference going to be? Blackouts are, they're irritating and...
Irritating? It'd be disastrous. It would destroy our economy.
Well, they would be now, but, some of us remember 3-day weeks and things like that. And in fact, I grew up thinking that everybody had, at least a couple of days a week when they had to eat off a primus stove and things.
This is, again, I don't want to harp on, but this is one of the problems in the politics in our country, isn't it? So many politicians, they just think in election cycles. Absolutely. They just think, what can I do and say to get my own backside re-elected at the next general election? They're not always looking ahead at, actually, politics aside, what is genuinely the best thing for this country.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 38 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? There's less than 21 minutes to go, but it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people on the weekends? Well, the government's counter-extremism commissioner has said London is a no-go zone for Jews during the weekends on the pro-Palestine marches. But march organisers said that Jewish people did not need to be scared of the events, which is ironic, really, because that police guy was telling that Jewish man that he needs to go because otherwise he was causing a bit of a problem. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, has London become a no-go zone for Jewish people on the weekends? Let's see what my panel make of that. Broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Right, Danny Kelly.
Listen, I think if you are identifiably of the Jewish faith and you feel that
you don't want to be subjected to. You don't necessarily need to be subjected to violence, but it's just hostility. Then that becomes a no-go zone. I agree with the former Bobby, that it's up to you whether you believe that you're safe to go into part of central London. And if you don't feel safe, and I don't think it should be belittled this by Peter, who said there's only been 36 charges. Listen, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get screamed at venomously. And people also need to understand that Jews, and I think people don't get this, but Jews, synagogues, for example, have private security, and they've always had it. You know, there's a nursing home for Jews in Birmingham that my wife's grandfather spent his final years at. They had private security. If I was identifiably Jewish, there are parts of Birmingham I wouldn't want to walk through. There are parts of Coventry. I've driven from just on the outskirts of Coventry to come here today, 96 miles.
You always do this every show. Does he ever miss that?
Well, this is GB News.
This is not going on about the BBC.
It's GB News. and you've got a massive following in the West Midlands, Nana.
Oh, thank you, Daddy.
And if I was identifiably Jewish, I wouldn't want to walk through the Fose Hill Road area of the city, because there are, unfortunately, a lot of dumbasses in certain communities that cannot differentiate between Zionism and the faith of Judaism.
Yes, apologies for the language there as well.
Forgive me if that was
some people may be offended
because
by that.
Just because you are Jewish doesn't mean that you believe in Zionism, and that is where the ignoramuses of certain communities, and that's why it becomes a no-go zone.
Christine Hamilton.
Well, Peter Tatchell was completely wrong. I think he said there have been 37 incidents.
36 charges.
36 charges. One of the reasons for that is because quite a lot of Jews do not want to go outside. They stay in their homes, so they are prohibited from going outside. And I know people Jewish people, their children no longer go to school with their school blazers on because they're frightened as they walk to school, so they go in mufti and they don't wear their skull caps anymore. They are frightened to be identified as Jews. And that, to be happening in our capital city, is a scandal, and it's shameful, and it shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be allowed. But the reason there isn't more Jewish people being harassed is because they just don't.
They don't come out.
They don't come out, and that is appalling. And especially women, frankly, are less likely to, and they're less likely to come out in the evening. And it shouldn't be happening.
But what about the argument that actually there's a lot of Jewish people on the protest? This is what people keep saying. This is what even James Schneider said.
I can address that. OK, so if
are they openly Jewish? I mean,
if you are, I'm not going to use the word openly. I'm going to say identifiably.
Identifiably.
So if you're identifiably Jewish and you're waving a Palestinian flag, then you're going to be OK, because you're on their side. It's when you're just walking around with your kids and you're just going shopping and you're not waving a pro-Palestine flag and you're not singing From the River to the Sea. So you're OK if you're on that tribe, if you like, because it's tribal. You're on that side of things, then you're going to be fine whether you're a Jew or not, because you're waving the flag.
So that's ridiculous. That's what you've got to do, isn't it, just to get through the streets quickly, is take a pro-Palestine flag and wave
a Palestinian flag, you'll get through London, no problem.
Wave a Jewish flag, you probably won't.
You'll be in trouble.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And even if there are Jewish people on those marches...
It's an Israeli flag, not a Jewish flag.
Israeli flag,
that's
of course.
the
Thank you.
What is wrong with being identifiably Jewish? Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing wrong with being identifiably whatever you happen to be.
Unless, of course, you're going through a pro-Palestine march.
If the copper had said identifiably Jewish, that would have made more sense, rather than openly.
But these are just, this is just semantics.
Semantics, you're right.
He may have just, he spoke in a way that people could catch on the words. But I think his meaning was to protect.
I think he meant well.
He meant well.
I think
he meant well. He's trying to protect, and but it's unfortunate that this is the state of affairs. But this shows nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice. Is there opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing? Right, how many have I got? I've got 3 of you. I'm going to start with Julie Ford in Bedfordshire. Julie.
Hi, Nana. Yeah, I agree with the panel. I think it's a case of it is getting scary out there now, and if you're not waving the right flag or wearing the right badge, you're being targeted wrongly. I married a Jew and I converted to Judaism to do that. I have many Jewish friends, and I also worked in a Jewish nursing home many years ago in Hampstead. And it's a very closed community, Judaism. We keep ourselves to ourselves, and we don't tend to go out on the street and be as vocal as some other religions. And I think now it's getting to the point where we're scared to go out on the street just in case we are identifiably Jewish. And it's interesting that no other religion is depicted in that way.
Although some people who follow Islam may say that they are targeted for wearing the hijab or the burqa. So, potentially. Alan Cook, who's there in London.
Hi, Nana. Well, I think the current situation is disgusting and it should be stopped. But, you know, are we really surprised? We've had 20 years of the Met Police wearing rainbow helmets, TikTok dancing, bending on their knees to Marxists. So, you know, what is any different now? But at least on the positive side, it is election year. We can get a new London mayor and a new prime minister who are not globalists. You know, hopefully we'll get someone in that will put the UK and its citizens first.
Well, they would argue that they are doing that, you see. That's what they think they're doing. All right, let's go to Dan in Hull. Hello, Dan. He's got his hat back on. Go on then, Dan. What do you think?
Nana. It's since when did this country, that historically we've always been welcoming to most faiths, since when did it become all right to start attacking Jews again? Because there's one religion in this country that you're not allowed to say anything about without reprisals or without being arrested or without being accused of being an Islamophobe. Jews, as a gay man, Jews don't want me dead. They don't want me arrested or thrown in prison. They have always lived peacefully and assimilated alongside the countries that they live in. What is the problem and where did it start going wrong?
Well, a lot of them would say potentially the bombing in Gaza, but of course not everybody who follows Islam would want you dead and all those things that you said there. So there are some who are extremists, but not most people are pretty normal and straightforward. Thank you so much, my great British voice. It's really good to talk to you, the fabulous Julie, also Dan and Alan. Thank you so much for joining me. Lovely to talk to you guys. Thank you for your thoughts. Well, if you just tuned in, welcome. It's just coming towards the end of the show, but on the way, Supplement Sunday with my panel and I talk about some of the news stories that have caught their eye. But next, a quick debate. Is it fair to tell people to lose weight? The Welsh Health Minister thinks so.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after another sunny day for most of us, there is a further cloud and rain on the way, all thanks to an area of low pressure well up to the north of the UK, but bringing these weak frontal systems that will sink their way southwards through the rest of the day. We do still have high pressure around, but that slowly slips away towards the northwest. So the cloudiest skies through the rest of today, definitely for eastern parts of Scotland, northern England, and slowly sinking their way southwards across much of the UK through the early hours of Monday morning. Western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland generally staying that little bit drier, but it's southern and eastern parts of England that will see those clear skies and some chilly temperatures with some frost in places, but not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain. That does mean that Monday starts a much cloudier day for most of us, particularly compared to the weekend, with the outbreaks of rain that we see through the morning slowly slipping their way southwards as we go through the rest of the day. Not turning particularly heavy, but definitely cloudier and a much damper day than we saw over the weekend. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon and feeling quite warm across much of Scotland, highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely chillier under all that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Monday and into the start of Tuesday, that weak frontal system eventually clears its way towards the southeast, leaving a bright start for many of us with plenty of sunshine through Tuesday morning. Southern and eastern parts still staying quite cloudy with outbreaks of rain, and there'll be further showers through Tuesday and Wednesday as well, and further hints of something more unsettled through the second half of the week.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, welcome. This is GB News, we are the People's Channel, and it's time for our mini debate and a little story that caught my eye. Well, a couple of stories. The Welsh Health Minister, who has called on people to lose weight in order to help combat NHS waiting lists, she said, the fact is that Wales, 60% of adults are overweight or obese, and we spend 10% of our budget on diabetes, which has a direct relationship with people overweight. And if that continues on the trajectory that we're on at the moment, then the system will become unsustainable. And well, also, this comes as the Welsh Government have also intervened on your driving speed with the introduction of the default 20 mph speed limits across Wales, which doesn't seem to be looking that good because a lot of people are revolting. Not literally revolting, they are revolting. Oh, God, I'm going to get myself in all sorts of trouble. Joining me now, my panel, Danny Kelly and Christine Hamilton. Sorry, they're not revolting. People are, you're not revolting, you're revolt. Oh, yeah, all right.
Well, I wonder if you're going to come to first to talk about obesity.
Oh, did I say anything? I didn't even say anything. Danny Kelly, no.
I remember going to the doctors about something completely unrelated to me being fat. And he said to me, he goes, now, listen, Dan, you've put weight on. And I thought that was really proactive, and I thought that was good medicining, not doctoring, because Christine and I were talking about this. It's not doctor. You get nursing, whatever. That's great advice. That's great.
Being a good doctor.
Now I've had a blood test recently, just like a midlife thing, and I have nothing to worry about with diabetes. Although I'm fat, I exercise regularly. OK? I've got great cholesterol.
What exercise do you do?
I'd go on the exercise bike.
You're fat and fit.
Fat and fit.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have a problem. I know that the beauty of this station is that we can talk about things like this. You wouldn't get this at the Beeb. And I don't have a problem with people who are fat being called fat, as long as it's in a well-intentioned...
Yeah, or an endearing way where it's a nice...
Like, oh, look at him, the fat kid. Oh, look at him. Oh, fatty.
It's all very well. You can call yourself fat, fit and fat, but if somebody else calls you fat, then they're fat shaming. This is what...
No, not necessarily.
But it is. That's what people accuse you of fat shaming.
No, because somebody may be telling you that for your health to help you, but it's the intention of it, and that's not a shameful thing. If you're overweight but you're happy with who you are, then it's not shameful. It's just how you want to be.
I'm not saying it is shameful. No, I know. I'm saying it will be misinterpreted by other people deliberately sometimes.
Yeah, deliberately, I think, in a lot of
things. It's fat shaming, like, you can't do that, you can't do ageism, you can't do...
Well, we can be honest here.
No, I think the health minister's absolutely right. And I'll tell you what shocks me is when you go to a hospital, the number of nurses who are not just overweight, they are grossly overweight.
Well, sometimes I've had that with a nutritionist who was telling me how to eat, and I thought,
no,
whatever you're telling me obviously doesn't work if you're doing it.
I know, but it isn't just diabetes; it's wear and tear on your limbs, on your joints, and goodness knows what.
And your heart, of
and
course.
what worries me is that I think it's 90-something%. I can't remember the figure. Something like 96% of obese children have obese parents.
I know.
And you see them walking down the street. You can see the big parents and waddling. And you see the fat children already shaping up to be fatty.
It's really wrong. I think it's almost a form of child abuse if you allow your children.
It's the biggest killer. And people need educating. They need to learn how to cook properly.
Anyway, so let's move on to Supplement Sunday. We could talk about this all. I'm starving. I'm looking forward to eating a really nice cake. A lovely lady made me a cake, and I love cakes. Right, but now it's time for Supplement Sunday, where my panel and I discuss some of the other news stories that caught their eye. Danny, Christine, what have you got for me?
Well, we've just discovered something rather embarrassing.
You're twins?
We've both got the same supplement.
Go on, then.
What?
That's just as well, because you've only got a minute.
What?
OK, right, well, I'll start.
This is news to me. I thought that was mine.
It isn't, it's mine. I asked for it first, so I'm going to go first.
Ladies first.
This is a Exeter University student. Admittedly, this was in 2018. He felt rather ashamed about it. He said, and he was heard through the wall of his room, he was heard saying that veganism is wrong and that gender fluidity is stupid, and he was threatened with expulsion.
He was ahead of his time. That was 6 years ago.
Well,
he's a prophet, this kid.
He really
and it just goes to show you how cheap the building buildings are, the thin walls. Honestly, planning applications, modern builds that you can hear people going to the toilet, flushing the toilet next door. That's modern builds. Everything's done so cheaply.
He says he's 6'5" with a deep intonation and his voice carries without him.
There you go. Yep.
He says it was like the Stasi had come to... You can imagine it, like the Stasi had come to my door. He stuck his foot in the door and said, "You've been saying some very offensive things."
How about you've been overhearing or eavesdropping in my conversation? Now, clear off. Honestly.
No, freedom of speech can now mean so little. It's shocking.
Well, in Scotland, you'd be arrested.
You would.
You'd be arrested.
Exeter University was approached for comment but did not respond.
Interesting stuff. Well, you both have great minds think alike. Tell them that, honestly.
That wasn't a set-up, everybody. That's completely genuine. We both chose the same one.
Yes, as I said, I'll say it again.
But he was ahead of his time. That was 6 years ago.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yes. Right. Well, listen, on today's show, we've been asking, is it time for the UK to build an Iron Dome? And according to our Twitter poll, 74% of you said yes, not surprising at all. Of course it's time to build an Iron Dome. It's time for us to sort out our army and everything else that comes with it. 24% of you said no. I've got to say a massive thank you to my brilliant panellists, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Thank you so much, Danny. And also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Thank you so much, Christine.
Pleasure, Nana, as always, to be with you and Danny.
And also a huge thank you to you at home for your company. It's been a pleasure as ever. I look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place. But next, it's Neil Oliver. But now I'll leave you with the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after another sunny day for most of us, there is a further cloud and rain on the way, all thanks to an area of low pressure well up to the north of the UK, but bringing these weak frontal systems that will sink their way southwards through the rest of the day. We do still have high pressure around, but that slowly slips away towards the northwest. So the cloudiest skies through the rest of today, definitely for eastern parts of Scotland, northern England, and slowly sinking their way southwards across much of the UK through the early hours of Monday morning. Western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland generally staying that little bit drier, but it's southern and eastern parts of England that will see those clear skies and some chilly temperatures with some frost in places, but not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain. That does mean that Monday starts a much cloudier day for most of us, particularly compared to the weekend, with the outbreaks of rain that we see through the morning slowly slipping their way southwards as we go through the rest of the day. Not turning particularly heavy, but definitely cloudier and a much damper day than we saw over the weekend. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon and feeling quite warm across much of Scotland, highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely chillier under all that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Monday and into the start of Tuesday, that weak frontal system eventually clears its way towards the southeast, leaving a bright start for many of us with plenty of sunshine through Tuesday morning. Southern and eastern parts still staying quite cloudy with outbreaks of rain, and there'll be further showers through Tuesday and Wednesday as well, and further hints of something more unsettled through the second half of the week.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to